How to Move the Stars by Jacob Lemansky. Chapter 11. Russia. May 28, 2013. Into Russia. Last night, a few drops of rain blew in. My hammock bobbed up and down as the trees flexed in the wind. I laid in the darkness, listening to the whipping rain fly until I had the good idea to hang my water bottles from the corners of the fabric. The extra weight tensioned the rain fly and muted the worst of the flapping. I was so proud of myself. After 3.5 months of trying different things, I finally figured out how to get a quiet night's rest. This morning, I biked into the 2,600-year-old port city of Kerch, which sits on the bank of the Kerch Strait between the Black Sea and Azov Sea. Like untold travelers before me, I was there to catch the ferry. I pushed my bike onto the deck of the boat, along with a dozen vehicles and a small crowd of people. I felt deep relief to be putting the Ukrainian drivers behind me, and as the boat left the dock, I was filled with excited anticipation to arrive in Russia. A tinge of nervousness came over me as the boat passed a buoy marking the border. I feel the same way entering every country. Stepping into the unknown is always daunting. I pushed my bike onto the far shore and stepped into the back of the customs line. A man my age tried talking to me but didn't speak English. A woman nearby sent her 10-year-old son over to help translate. He didn't speak much English either, but I explained to him that I was from the United States and on my way to China. Everyone standing in line was watching our interaction. When the boy relayed my words, they collectively nodded their approval. The boy's mother gave me a handful of chocolates. An older man gave me a pen, and another guy gave me a bottle of water. The guy who gave me water then walked me outside to the border control officer checking vehicles. He talked him into letting me skip the line of people and go through with the cars. The border guard was clean-cut, younger than me, and had a machine gun hanging from his shoulder. He was both serious and friendly, and I was surprised to be addressed in fluent English. We went through the paperwork together, then he stamped my passport and wished me safe travels. I thanked him, then pedaled into Russia, feeling at ease after the warm welcome. Late this afternoon, I pushed my bike to the back of a farm field to hang my hammock. My view looks out at the Azov Sea and the setting sun. Small waves are lapping against the shore below, and birds are singing in the trees. I'm out of water, so I've been drinking the sweet red wine given to me in Moldova. I'm a few cups in and feeling a wonderful sense of contentment. I'm exactly where I want to be. The physical challenge of crossing the land has faded away along with every mountain and hill. To overcome the flat terrain requires little more than persistence. This part of the journey is a tradition of exploration, from a time when tepid oceans were crossed at the pace of the wind. Lessons are in those long, slow miles, each one chipping away at the psyche a little more. Russia will be my trial of meditation. Ahead of me is a 4,600-kilometer plain of farmland, one of the longest stretches of persistent landscape in the world. I'm learning that a physical prowess is needed to achieve a summit, but a mental fitness is necessary to cross a valley. As I pedal into this flat expanse, I will try to remember. Moments that move one's soul can happen anywhere. I will cross these still waters, and I will learn those lessons. May 29, 2013. A good lunch. The small Russian towns today felt friendly and inviting. People were riding bikes and walking on the sidewalks. Shops were busy. The vibrance was a welcome change from the last few countries in Eastern Europe. The vitality obviously came from Russia's higher standard of living. A sure indication of the richer economy was that the grass on the side of the road was being mowed by maintenance crews instead of gathered for animal feed. Throughout the morning, I followed the coast of the Azov Sea, past fields of grapes and patches of poppies growing wild on the roadside. A man on a motorcycle took an interest in me and pulled over to talk. He didn't speak English, but that is slowly becoming less of a barrier. Without actively trying, I've been developing new habits of communication. I'm now much more animated in my speech. I never used to talk with my hands, but now I flail about descriptively. My facial expressions are also more exaggerated as I try to make the emotions behind them easier to read. Without exactly understanding the man's question, I pointed behind me and said Portugal, then I pointed ahead and said China. I tried to tell him I've been going for 100 days by pointing at the sun and holding up my right index finger and pumping my left fist twice, but I don't think he understood. The man offered to buy me lunch, so I followed him down the road for 10 minutes while he slowly drove ahead. We arrived at a cafeteria-style restaurant with pre-made plates of food lined up for us to choose from. I followed my friend's lead and filled my tray with a fish fillet, vegetable soup, egg salad, cake, and grape juice. We sat at a small table which became so full with our food that when I bumped my plate, the glass of grape juice fell into the man's tray and pooled beneath the dishes. I was embarrassed, but the man seemed unfazed. He tossed a napkin into the puddle and went back to eating. I tried to have a conversation while we ate, but I really struggled to communicate. Soon we were both sitting in silence, and I was racing to keep up with the pace he was eating. My tendency is to stretch out my meals while I rest and watch the clouds drift by. Lunch with this man was over in 5 minutes. Before leaving the restaurant, I tried filling my water bottles in the sink, but my friend didn't like that idea. Instead, he bought a couple bottles of spring water for me. I still haven't broken my habit of getting water from sinks. I've decided that the risk of getting sick is acceptable to avoid purchasing so many plastic bottles. I'm just going to do my best to find clean water sources and trust in my iron stomach. Outside of the restaurant, I took a picture with the man and told him I would post it on my blog. He gave me a smartphone to type in my website, hammockearring.com, a word I made up to fit alongside mountaineering and canyoneering, but with hammocks. I looked at his phone, but the keyboard that popped up had no N, R, or I, so I was unable to show him. I shrugged my shoulders and handed back the phone, a fitting end to our whole awkward interaction. I thanked him for the meal, then went on my way. Tonight I've hidden myself by sagging my hammock into a small ditch. If I peek my head up, I can see across the farm field stretching out to the horizon. Long strands of grass fill in the space around me. The light is fading from the day, but not yet the heat, and stars are beginning to appear through the gaps in the leaves above me. May 30th, 2013, Moscow Pool. Yesterday, I was so slow that I couldn't tell if my bike needed maintenance or if I was simply tired. I got everything lubricated before getting started this morning, but I wasn't any faster. The problem was definitely me. At a gas station, I told the attendant that I sleep in the forest and fields. In a caring way, he mined a gun with his fingers to ask if I'm worried about being found. A lot of people ask about this, and I share their concern. At night is when I'm most vulnerable. My gear is unpacked, no one else is around, and I have no means to get away quickly. Only by luck am I avoiding dangerous chance encounters. To answer the man, I put my hand over my heart and said, "I'm learning to trust." But he didn't understand. In the late afternoon, I sat in a shaded spot by the side of the road. I'd gone 40 miles across bland farm fields and wasn't motivated to go any farther. I was actually feeling rather dispirited. My legs were tired, I was frustrated by my dragging pace, and the tedious farm fields were wearing me down mentally. That's when a group of 5 cyclists about my age stopped to say hello. I was offered a drink from a bottle labeled Kvass, but they called it Russian Coca-Cola. They said the nickname comes from the dark brown color and the fizz. The taste was slightly sweet, lightly carbonated, with more than a hint of fermentation. I asked about the ingredients, and surprisingly, they said the drink is made from bread. The group was lighthearted and friendly, and I was cheered up to be around them. By myself, I was too tired to continue, but with them, I was motivated to ride another 20 miles to the city of Krasnodar. Along the way, we stopped at a small convenience store and bonded over ice cream bars. The sun had nearly set when we arrived in town. Everyone split to get home before dark, and the woman in the group, Marina, invited me to camp in her yard. She led me down a dirt path, across the farm field and through a graveyard before arriving at our home where she lived with her parents, sister, and 2 young nieces. She went inside while I hung my hammock in the backyard between trees full of sweet ripe cherries. I was eating them when Marina came back outside to invite me in for dinner. We had potatoes and pork, strawberries, 2 types of pastries, cucumbers, bread, and cherry juice. I was served a drink that they made by smashing strawberries into the base of a wide mug, adding an extra strong shot of cold black tea, a spoonful of sugar, and topping the cup off with hot water. We also had a glass of homemade wine, and when I told the father I was impressed with the flavor, he proudly presented me with a plastic 1.5-liter bottle of wine to take along with me. Collectively, the family spoke just enough English for us to have a conversation. The father worked as an engineer and built the house we were sitting in. He smiled easily and had gleaming gold teeth. Marina was a committed cyclist and rides in events that go for hundreds of miles. She and her mother both exuded a quiet kindness. As the evening was winding down, the father invited me into the basement for a game of pool on a table he built himself. The pool table was the largest I had ever seen. The pool balls were also bigger, but the pockets were narrower. He called the game Russian pool and taught me the rules. There were 15 white balls and 1 red cue ball. The first one to use the cue ball to pocket 8 of the others wins. The game was fun, but short. He beat me 8-1. May 31st, 2013. A Russian treasure. Marina was gone in the morning. She left early to get to her job at the library. When I said goodbye to her parents, they passed on a gift from her, an art piece she had made. I was handed a masterfully painted wooden egg the size of my fist. Wrapping around the curved surface was the scene of a woman standing in a lush pasture beneath a black sky. She's wearing a red dress with fine, intricate gold lace painted with a single strand brush. Her face showed quiet contentment as her arms reached out. To her right, a log home with a red roof. To her left, mountains under a golden sun. The piece is beautiful, a treasure to carry home with me. The temperature is 90 degrees today with a stiff headwind. I felt like I was biking into a blow dryer, and practically, I was. I drank 10 liters of water, and my shirt never even became wet. I only got a sense of how much I was sweating when I stepped into a gas station. In the still air, my skin became saturated so quickly that I could feel the beads of sweat running down my face, arms, and legs, leaving a trail of drips across the floor behind me. I picked an ice cream out of the cooler, then walked to the sales counter, where I discovered that today was the store's grand opening, and I happened to be their very first customer. Watching the sale were 15 employees and managers in a half circle around the back of the cashier. With all eyes on me, I became self-conscious of how wet I was, and felt embarrassed when sweat began to drip from my nose onto the brand new counter. I wiped the drops away with the hem of my shirt. The cashier kept to her script. In Russian, she tried to upsell me a rotisserie hot dog. I declined. When I was handed my change, the 2 managers gave each other a congratulatory handshake. I imagined them framing my sweaty ruble to hang on the wall, commemorating their first sale. I met a guy named Oleg out on his first day of a local bicycle tour. We stayed together for a couple of hours in the afternoon. He didn't speak English, so we rode in silence, but I enjoyed having someone to look around with. At the gas station, we sat in the cafe to eat ice cream and attempted a conversation over Google Translate. We tried, but his translated questions were near gibberish, and the answers I got from him didn't correspond to what I was asking. He seemed to be as confused as I was. On my way to finding a place to sleep between the farm fields, I came upon a full ripe mulberry bush. Finding the wild bounty gave me great joy. The fruit was sweet, and I gorged myself until I could skip dinner. I was reminded of my childhood computer game, The Oregon Trail. In the game, I was a settler in 1848, navigating an ox-drawn wagon across North America. I remember being thrilled when my character found berries along the trail. The game was essentially a story about traveling very far, very slowly, and was perhaps pivotal in shaping my sense of adventure. I've got my hammock hanging now. The sky is dark and the birds have gone quiet. My legs are propped up a little higher than my body. I'm hoping to drain the soreness out of them. June 1st, 2013. Avoiding the rain in Russia. This morning, from my hammock, I saw beautiful reds and pinks swirling low over the horizon. I watched until I fell asleep again. When I awoke a second time, the sun was up and I was already sweating. I followed the flat, quiet road past expansive fields and patches of forest. The many shades of green beamed in the bright sunlight. Small towns came and went every hour. I tracked the weather drifting across the wide open landscape, and in the early afternoon, I spotted a thunderstorm coming my way. Just as the rain started to fall, I tied my tarp to the low branch of a tree, then huddled beneath. Lightning cracked overhead, and I slowly became soaked as the rain came down on my makeshift shelter. Once the storm passed, I started down the road only to see the rain change direction and come at me a second time. I raced to keep ahead of the downpour before pulling into an empty bus shelter. While the rain fell, I was content to wait. The time was peaceful in a way. I sat for hours with nothing to do and doing nothing. When the last few drops of rain had wrung from the sky, I left the bus stop to ride late into the evening. I pedaled hard in the wake of the storm, riding the wave of air being sucked along behind, splashing through puddles the whole way. As I've been going north and the summer solstice approaches, I have significantly more daylight than when I started. In February, the sun was up for 10 hours and 45 minutes. Today, I had 17 hours of daylight. I was able to pedal late into the evening, almost to 10 p.m., and with the last bit of light, I pulled into a farm field to hang my hammock in a dark patch of trees. June 2nd, 2013. Pretty Russian day. I'm reading the Motorcycle Diaries by Che Guevara. In 1952, he traveled 5,000 miles across South America. He speaks about leaving civilization behind and being free from society. I don't have that same sense of removal. Today, there are 5 billion more people alive than when he did his journey. Civilization spreads out inescapably around me. To get away completely would be a different sort of adventure. In truth, my reliance on society is the same as before I started. What's different is that I no longer feel like a participant. I've become an observer. I'm now on the outside, looking in. I made slow progress today. My legs were tired and I had a light headwind. Needing a break, I took a long, relaxing lunch in a grove of trees. Stretching far into the distance around me were acres of flax, blooming with millions of soft blue flowers. I walked out into the field humming with bees. Above me were 1,000 cotton ball clouds beneath a deep blue sky. Wherever the sun streaked through to the ground, colors burst forth, vivid and bright. I took a photograph, but the scene deserved a painting. The big toe on my left foot has been hurting. My shoe is pinching the skin into the nail, and this evening, I squeezed milky green pus out of the blister. I know this means there is an infection, but I have no way to treat the problem. I don't even have clean socks to put on, just the one pair I've been wearing the past 3.5 months. I adjusted my shoelaces to reduce the pressure on my toe. Hopefully that will be enough to heal. Tonight, I'm camping in an airy grove of trees on the edge of a field of wheat. A breeze has picked up, soft rain is falling, and there's lightning flashing in the distance. This is a good spot, except I'm a little nervous about the dead branch creaking in the wind above me. June 3rd, 2013. Towel. I left with a push from the wind to spend the day surrounded by magnificent farmland and sky. Fields of wheat stretched out to the horizon like an ocean, and under the bright sun, currents of air sweeping across the grains were revealed as beautiful golden waves. In one exquisite moment, I matched the speed of a gust blowing straight at my back. The world around me danced and swayed, yet I was in perfectly still air. I had become one with the wind, rolling across the land. The sensation was surreal, and I was overwhelmed by the beautiful moment. My eyes filled with quiet tears of joy. I stopped at a gas station for ice cream and to get out of the sun. Several curious employees gathered around to look at my bike and try to talk to me. I stayed for an hour, cooling off in the shade as they worked around me. When I was ready to leave, the group came back together to see me off with a gift, a towel with the gas station's logo. I didn't want a towel, but they are well known to be about the most massively useful thing one can carry. I accepted graciously. Before beginning this journey, I feared the loneliness of being by myself would be too much to bear, but I'm not fully alone. Interactions like the one at the gas station are fun and meaningful, and they happen every day. What I have lost is someone I can know, and who knows me, but I don't feel lonely. I feel light. I've shed the burden of time, energy, and care that goes into relationships, as though they are fires I am no longer tending. I now sit in the dark, but I'm free to just sit. As I've persisted in my isolation, I've begun to recognize subtle aspects of this experience. One nuance is that I am living without social influence. I don't exist in society enough to infer norms, and by not being with people, I have removed myself from their judgment, good or bad. I view this as a positive. My impression of the world has been freed from the consensus of thought around me. Through my isolation, I'm learning to be exactly myself, undirected except by my own morals and principles. I wonder who I will become. Tonight, I'm in a narrow strip of forest looking out from my hammock at the purple twilight. A mixed herd of goats, sheep, and cows are moving through. 2 shepherds are here as well, but they pass by without seeing me. June 4th, 2013. Black flies. A couple of days ago, I met a man on a motorcycle tour heading the opposite direction. With a sort of 1,000-yard stare, he talked about black flies in maddening numbers. At the time, I wasn't able to imagine why he was so bothered, but after today, I understand. The first flies appeared in the afternoon. I noticed a dispersed cloud of them buzzing in my wake. I figured if I could stay ahead of them, they would leave me alone. How far could a little bug really fly before becoming exhausted? I sprinted away for 10 minutes, only to find more flies had joined the chase. For the rest of the day I tried to outrun them, but that proved to be a hopeless effort. Mile after mile, there were always more. By this evening, the flies had persisted longer than I could, and the swarm thickened when I stopped for the night. The flies homed in on my ears and nostrils. I inhaled 2 as soon as I stopped. I put bug mesh over my head, but they continued to find ways in through the gaps around my neck. Once inside, they were killed by chemicals in the fabric, and their bodies piled up under my chin. Before getting in my hammock, I moved some distance away, let the flies congregate around me, then sprinted back. As quickly as I could, I unzipped the bug mesh, jumped inside, and closed myself in. In just that brief moment, 24 flies followed me inside and to their deaths. I still hear the horde outside, tapping against my hammock, trying to get in. June 5th, 2013. Lots of biking, lots of relaxing. A singing bird woke me as the sun was rising, pink and beautiful. I left quickly, trying to avoid the flies, but they were already waiting, ready to engulf me whenever I stopped moving. Because of this, I ate breakfast and brushed my teeth while I pedaled. After that, I put bug mesh over my head and didn't stop biking for the rest of the day. The bug mesh made me dreadfully hot, but without the protection, I kept inhaling the flies. At noon, I passed a crew laying a new road in hellish working conditions. The temperature was 92 degrees and there was no wind at all. Toxic fumes rising off the molten macadam filled the air. The laborers were afforded no safety equipment and paid so little that they didn't wear shoes. Many had on plastic flip-flops. One man was barefoot. The fresh blacktop must have felt like walking on hot coals. Boiling drops of tar splashed at their feet. They didn't even wear hats or sunglasses to fend off the relentless glaring sun. The worst part must have been the tormenting flies, endlessly crawling into their ears and nostrils. I knew they were in a bad situation because I was out there with them. As I passed, the men all looked up from their work. I smiled and waved, and they all waved back. The landscape has dried out since yesterday. Well-maintained crops have given way to open pastures of weeds and short grasses. I passed cowboys on horseback moving a herd of cattle. Cowboys have such a large cultural footprint in America that I was comforted seeing the full-brimmed hats, jeans, and leather boots. For a moment, I felt like I was somewhere familiar. By the time I stopped in the early afternoon, the flies had pursued me for 90 straight miles. I was getting tired, so I decided to find a place to sleep before entering the more populated outskirts of Volgograd. I set up my hammock on the edge of a farm field, crawled inside, and haven't left since. In the future, I don't expect this day to be a memorable one, but right now, I find great satisfaction in being patient and persistent. Today feels like a job well done. My reward for the 9-hour effort is a lovely endorphin high. My spirit feels light, and my mind is at ease. June 6, 2013. Into Volgograd. Today I entered the city of Volgograd, known during World War II as Stalingrad, the site of the deadliest battle in the history of humanity. As the namesake of Joseph Stalin, the city became a symbol not to be lost under any circumstances, and to Adolf Hitler, a prize to be taken. Extensive bombing reduced the buildings to rubble. Fighting became ferocious, close-quarters mayhem. In a little over 5 months, more than 1.5 million people died, 10,000 per day. The Russians who survived were named the victors, and the Axis powers never recovered. The city is best described as industrial. Factories line the waterfront supplied by rumbling cargo trains. The only interesting sights were the striking war memorials, the most famous being the Motherland Calls. At a height of 285 feet, the statue is the tallest of a woman in the world. The monument presents her as powerful, striding forward, barefoot, the wind pressing a sheer dress against her body. A sword in her right hand is thrust into the sky. With her left arm, she reaches backwards, turning her head and shoulders to call to those behind. A pose taken when leading a charge, inspiring all others to follow. The image is powerful and moving. The statue stands at the high point of the city, a location that changed hands many times during the deadly battle. The steep hillsides were shelled into gentle slopes, and the land was so scorched that no plants would grow for many years afterwards. A survey of the area found that in every square meter there was 1,000 fragments of bombs and bullets. Given the importance of the battle, an argument could be made that the tide of the war and the future of the world was passed back and forth atop that hill. Admittedly, I did not see the statue in person. I learned of the monument this evening from a flyer at the hotel lobby. I was biking in traffic when I passed the park entrance. I even noticed a hill, but I didn't look up. I missed the largest statue in Europe by a glance. I could go back, only 7 miles, but I'm not going to. Biking across the city once was enough. I've long suspected that my lack of research causes me to miss fantastic sights along my route, but this is the first one that's been confirmed. Everything I don't see, because I don't know to look, is a necessary sacrifice for the feeling that comes from discovering the world for myself. To maintain my wide-eyed sense of awe, I can't know what's ahead of me, and I can't be sure of what's around. I must live in the unknown and embrace my ignorance. The hotel I found this evening was converted from a Soviet-style apartment building. Hundreds of these gray monoliths spread across Volgograd. The construction is practical, durable, and equal to all others. A design that follows the values of the time. The cityscape they created was devoid of artistry, unattractive, and uninspiring. My room is slightly more cheerful than the outside of the building. I have a small balcony overlooking a park and the river. I would argue that the bathroom is unfinished, but obviously they wrapped up their work some time ago. Bare pipes come in through sledge-hammered holes. Half of the tiles have fallen off the wall. The floor is bare brick and the drain is a square hole with a pool of milky water. I skipped taking a shower, but I did wash my clothes in the sink. When I laid down to relax, I found the cotton mattress to be so thin that I could feel the hard wooden platform on the points of my shoulder blades. This is why I prefer to sleep outside. My hammock, or even laying on the grass, would be more comfortable. June 7th, 2013. Leaving Volgograd. I talked to Katie this morning, and it felt good to connect with her. I merged forward knowing she's waiting for me at the end, yet I also sense how tenuous that truth is. She and I have never talked about our future together. Since we started dating, the most far-reaching plan I've made for my life took me to the beginning of this journey. Now that I've started, I don't think about anything farther off than the next place to find food. I'm not sure what I want after this journey. I don't know what Katie wants either. Leaving the hotel this morning, I was again struck by the drab and depressing city architecture. The roads were deteriorating and the traffic was heavy. Dirt footpaths had formed where I expected sidewalks to be. To get out of the city, I had to cross the Volga River along the lip of a hydraulic dam. There was a pedestrian walkway separate from the road that was too narrow to fit my bike, so I was forced to cross with the cars, riding on the white line pinched between the traffic and the guardrail. Normally, I can steer off the road if a truck forces me to, but on the bridge, I lost that option. I could only go forward. The river was 1.5 miles wide and my adrenaline got me across in record time. On the far side, I turned off the highway and breathed a sigh of relief. For the rest of the day, I crossed a vast plain of farmland and dry grasses. In 40 miles, there were only 3 slight turns and not even a speed bump to climb over. I was bicycling north with the sun on my back, and as the hours passed, I was entertained watching my shadow slowly sweep around me. I am a sundial, and today, I became patient enough to notice. When the time showed 7 p.m., I pulled into a thin stretch of forest between farm fields. I set up my hammock, made noodles with a can of black beans, and retreated to my hammock to eat lying down, protected from the flies. As I lie here, I've been watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. June 8th, 2013. Russian bus stops. In my attempt to be self-sufficient on this journey, I decided that I never wanted to rely on power outlets to charge my tablet. My solution was a dynamo hub, which creates a charge whenever my front wheel is spinning. The dynamo does charge my tablet, but keeping the system working has been a source of frustration. The constant road vibration breaks the thin wires running from the hub to the battery in my handlebar bag. Today again, I spent an hour tracking down a brake and splicing the wires back together. Keeping my tablet charged feels especially important because that's what I use for a map. I've considered getting paper maps as backups, but every week I travel 350 miles in one direction. If I followed paper maps, I would constantly need to be buying more, and that assumes they are even available. Since starting in Portugal, I have not seen any maps for sale. Today again, I followed a road pointing straight to the end of the horizon. On my left and right, rows of shrubs and trees blocked my view of anything more. Occasionally, a gap in the forest would let me see out to a field of dry grass. The one interesting view was a glimpse of the mighty Volga River. The dark water stretched an impressive 3 miles across, and on the far side, the land had eroded to create a bank of white cliffs. Oddly enough, the one thing I do get excited to see are the bus stop shelters. They are decades old, the paint is faded, and bits of gravel and broken glass pile in the corners. I find them at quiet crossroads that feel like the middle of nowhere. Each one is big enough for a half dozen people, although I've rarely seen anyone waiting, or even a bus on the road. The concrete and steel structures are exceedingly sturdy. No natural wind could ever make one shudder. What I really like is that each bus stop is unique. Architects played with angles and shapes to make a wide range of individual designs. I think the reason for the creativity is that in this vast plain without natural landmarks, the bus stops themselves become the way people distinguish where to get off. Adding to their charm, many of the stops are decorated with wonderful mosaics of abstract landscapes. Compared to the Russian cities, the colorful facade seems out of character. My favorite one depicted birds in flight over a village on a blustery day. With a skillful touch, the tiles were placed in sinuous flowing lines and represented the wind. Sadly, the piece sat unfinished, abandoned years ago. Where the tiling ended, there remained a painted sketch of what was left to be done. I saw the uncovered wall as ambition beyond reach. After 10,000 tiles, the artist failed to place another. I've told a lot of people that I'm trying to circle the earth on a bicycle. I've painted a grand vision across the map of the world, and now I must fill the line in. Not one tile at a time, but 1 mile at a time. The artist of that mosaic was creating something beautiful. I wonder what caused them to stop. I wonder what my reason will be. In the afternoon, I bicycled out of the cloud of flies that has persisted for the past 250 miles. I celebrated by taking a nap in my hammock without bothering to close the bug mesh. To be left in peace was glorious, and I slept for hours. I'm in my hammock again tonight, in a strip of forest between farm fields. 2 hawks have joined me for the evening, circling overhead as I look for dinner. June 9th, 2013. Friendly Captains. I got up with the sun and bicycled 15 miles to where an arm of the Volga River branched out across the land. When I arrived, a ferry was chugging away, just 100 yards from the dock. I'd missed the boat by 3 minutes. In a little shack next to the dock, there were a few people eating smoked fish and drinking vodka. They told me the ferry would be back in 2 hours. Not wanting to wait, I pointed to a decaying wooden rowboat with an outboard motor. This got everyone's attention, and they gathered around while I haggled for a ride. The man I talked to was about 50 years old. He wore track pants and a white shirt with horizontal blue stripes. He was barefoot, and though I was there early in the morning, he obviously had several shots of vodka in him. I asked about the price, but he waited for me to make the first offer. I thought about the going rate for a ride in a little boat in Russia. I had no reference point. I didn't even know how much the ferry cost. I offered him $9, and he gladly accepted. My bike and trailer filled the whole boat. The man sat on the back rail with the motor while I sat on the nose. A big yellow dog also jumped in with us. The man tried to get her out, but she bit at him, so he let her ride along. We pushed away from the dock to cross a mile of gentle water, and 20 minutes later, we arrived at the far shore. I was pushing my bike up to the road when the father and son who operate the ferry invited me in for tea. The ferry is big enough for half a dozen cars, and there was a cabin where the men lived. I joined them inside where we sat at a cramped table in a little kitchen. They brought out a plate of pickles, fish they caught in the river, and shots of vodka. Neither of them spoke English, but I stayed for an hour, and we managed a decent conversation. They asked how much I paid to cross the river. Their boat would have cost me $3, but they thought I got a fair price. Like other times in Eastern Europe that I've been invited into people's homes, I was offered a place to take a nap. I haven't figured out if it is a cultural nuance or if I simply look tired. I declined the nap, but only because the time was 9 a.m. They gave me a gift when I left, a photocopy of a periodic table with the elements replaced by different types of alcohol. I've seen similar posters in freshman dorm rooms, except this one was written in Russian. I thanked them and added the paper to my treasure trove. After I said goodbye to the captains, I had the road all to myself. The ferry was holding up traffic, so I didn't see any vehicles for an hour. Then a group of cars all came at once. 2 hours after that, I was passed by several more. The world was noticeably quieter without the traffic. I could hear the breeze through the leaves and the sound of my bike. I was able to let my guard down, but I also felt a tinge of loneliness. I was surprised to realize that the collective of passing drivers have become like a companion to me. The person is never the same, but someone is always with me. Without the cars on the road, I felt alone. This evening, I set up a camp on a hill overlooking a small river. A horse found me soon after, and right now, he's staring at me from a dozen paces away. Sometimes he takes a bite of grass and makes a loud swallowing sound. Mosquitoes and flies buzz in his eyes and bite at his tender back. The constant twitch of his tail does little to help. Earlier, I saw him scratching himself by rubbing vigorously against a tree. The horse's front feet are bound by a chain to prevent him from taking large steps. I've seen this a few times, even solid cuffs that force the horse to hop forward with its front legs. I assume the horses are bound so that they don't wander too far when left on unfenced land. Certainly this horse wasn't getting away. While I cooked dinner, he meandered around my camp and knocked over my bike. I yelled at him and threw an empty can that bounced off his butt as he shuffled away. I wanted to scare him off, but he's simply more curious than afraid. I'm worried my bike wheel will be stepped on, or he'll try to walk through my hammock rope. A horse is a wild card, and I'm in no position to be taking chances. I want him gone, but I can't make him go. Hopefully by morning, he has found somewhere else to be. June 10th, 2013. Horse. I woke up to the horse's head 10 inches from my face this morning. He was scratching his chin on the rope that suspends my bug mesh. I reached out and pushed him away. I was sympathetic that he was tortured by mosquito bites, but I didn't want him touching my things. He shuffled off, and I packed up to leave. The time was only 4 a.m., but morning had already arrived. The sky was filling with pastel light, and thin wispy clouds shimmered in the first rays of sunshine. The birds were awake too, and singing their favorite songs. I was out of food and excited to get to town to buy more, but I arrived too early. Everyone was asleep and the stores were still several hours from opening. A gas station was my only option. I bought a 1 kilogram bag of cookies and snacked on them for 50 miles until I found an actual store. I also stopped to talk to a car mechanic. When I fell in Ukraine, a bolt sheared off in my bike frame, and I hoped the mechanic could help. The guy was about 40 years old and wore greasy work clothes with sandals. He was one of 2 men in the small 1-car garage. I showed him my problem, and he had a look on his face like he had never seen a broken bolt before. I should have taken that as a sign. He started off with pliers but couldn't get a grip. Next, he used a drill to cut away at the bolt material. The progress was slow, and he pushed so hard that the drill bit broke. After 20 minutes, I was losing confidence in him. I hoped he would give up on his own, but when he didn't, I was compelled to let him keep trying. His next idea was to use a hammer and nail to push the bolt out. I didn't like watching him pounding on my bike, but by that point, we were both committed. Eventually, the bolt was out, but the threads were destroyed, and the now oval hole was just as useless as if I left the broken bolt in place. In the afternoon, I bicycled past the landing site of the first man into space. Yuri Gagarin aboard Vostok 1. In 1961, he orbited the Earth once, then parachuted into a field east of the Volga River. The flight took just 89 minutes. Out here, under the perpetual sky, I have a keen awareness that I am in space all the time. I think of my bike as a spaceship, lifting me 6 inches into the cosmos as I slowly orbit the Earth. Tonight, I'm sleeping in a grove of trees close to the road. When I chose this spot, I didn't realize I was directly in line with an airport runway. And now, airplanes keep coming in low and loud above me. I'm hoping they stop flying after dark. June 11th, 2013. A quiet day. I slept well last night, but apparently not enough. Again today I needed to hang my hammock for a long afternoon nap. I feel as if I'm recovering from a soul-level weariness brought on by the exhausting pace of the American lifestyle. Out here, I sleep as much as I need to feel recovered, something the hustle culture would construe as laziness. I never suspected that bicycling around the world would be more restful than living in society. After sleeping for 5 hours, I got back on the road to bicycle into the evening. The air had cooled and traffic was light. I was enjoying the ride when a shard of broken mirror pierced my trailer tire. I patched the tube in front of a bus stop where one young boy waited by himself. He watched in silence for a half hour as I took off my bags, removed the wheel, then the tire, found the hole in the tube, glued on a patch, then put everything back together. When I left, I waved goodbye to him, but he just kept staring. The sun was getting low when I pulled into a stretch of forest to spend the night. The black flies have gone, but there were so many mosquitoes I had to zip myself into my hammock to eat dinner lying down. The warm pot of rice felt good on my chest. I ate slowly and watched as the stars poked through the fading twilight. June 12, 2013. Playing guitar for sheep. I crossed another 50 miles of farm fields today. The flat terrain persisted, with only a single hill to the north that slowly passed, then disappeared behind me. Throughout the day, I noticed that the wheat fields had grown taller compared to when I started this journey. This means that I am now entertaining myself by watching the grass grow. As I pedaled, the sun beat down and the temperature edged towards 100 degrees. I stopped at a gas station for ice cream and to fill my water. I've started carrying extra plastic bottles for these hot days, and I filled them all in the sink. A mile down the road, I noticed that the water tasted like a pond. Upon further inspection, the water is the same hazy brown color as the water in the canal I was next to. The gas station is also next to the canal. I dumped all my bottles and sat by the water and used my filter to refill them again. After I finished pumping, I stayed in the shade to wait out the midday heat. I got out my guitar, and as I was strumming, a shepherd came by with his sheep and cows. He took a seat in the grass facing me, and I told him about my journey as best I could, pointing to where I was coming from and where I was going. He smiled when I played guitar for him. I liked his company, but the work of a shepherd never lets him be still for long. After a few minutes, the animals moved on, and he was obliged to follow. Rising to his feet, he waved goodbye, then walked away. I watched as he and his flock slowly moved into the distance. The day never did cool off, and this evening, I laid in my hammock for an hour before I stopped sweating. I passed the time looking out at the farm fields and listening to the birds in the trees. Now, a small animal was wandering in the nearby brush. I'm guessing a porcupine. More than any other animal, I've seen a lot of dead porcupines on the road, so there must be living ones around here too. I'm not worried. I've got my hammock high off the ground tonight. June 13th, 2013. Slow day in Russia. A terrible wind arrived this morning. Dust and bits of trash swirled into the sky. Specks of dirt stung my face and irritated my eyes. I tucked over my handlebars, pedaling hard, but only managed a measly 4 miles per hour. Where the road turned, the wind shifted to blasting the left side of my body, and to keep from being blown off into the shoulder, I had to balance my bike by leaning into the car lane. Semis towing trailers, passing me from behind, would momentarily block the wind, causing me to fall towards their large rolling tires. I had to watch for the trucks in my mirror and straighten up just as they caught me. Violent eddies of churning air tossed me around as the trailers roared past. Then, the moment they got ahead of me, I would throw my body back towards the road as the crosswind hit me again. I watched behind me as much as ahead. To stay safe, not a single vehicle passed that I didn't see coming. Eventually, the situation became so obviously dangerous that I could no longer ignore the risk. I pulled over to sit in the shade of a tree and let the wind die down. I waited 3 hours before the storm subsided. By that point, I was worried I was going to be stuck there for days. I got back on the road, feeling excited to continue. I saw a hitchhiker standing near 4 abandoned buildings. The wind was 100 degrees and the sun was unrelenting. As I passed, he mimed drinking from a cup to indicate that he was thirsty, but I didn't stop. I was thirsty too, and already rationing the little water I had left. Any that I gave away would only make my own situation more precarious, and I wasn't even sure when I'd be able to get water again. On the other hand, a thirsty man asked me for water. I considered my options for 100 yards before turning back. The man was in a piteous state. He had nothing with him except the worn-out clothes he was wearing. His lips were chapped, and from the way he was slouching, I could tell that he was wary from the heat. I wondered if he was looking at me, thinking all the same things. I handed him the bottle off my bike with the last of my water. He obviously wasn't familiar with the way a squirt bottle works, and I was grossed out when he sucked on the nozzle. He drank only half of what was left, which I thought was courteous of him. A half hour later, I saw the man again. He had caught a ride ahead to the next intersection. As I passed, we smiled and waved to each other. I would have felt mortified if I had snubbed him, then we met a second time. In that moment, I learned that karma follows too closely to ever deny water to someone who's thirsty. Given what I'm doing, there's a chance I'll be in his shoes sooner than I think. I was on the lookout for more water to filter when I unexpectedly came across a fancy new hotel. There was no towns around, and the place seemed too extravagant for the local farm community to support. With water bottles in hand, I stepped into the impressive front lobby. I was silently questioning the business sense of the owners when they walked out of the back room to greet me. The man was in his mid-40s, and his wife was a little younger. They wore fashionable clothing that seemed out of place in the countryside. When we struggled to communicate, the woman called her daughter, who speaks English, then handed me the smartphone to talk. The moment I stepped out of the hot wind, I'd begun to sweat profusely. I hesitated, but without another option, I placed the phone against my wet face. The daughter asked me if I wanted a room, but I told her I was just there for water. I was embarrassed to hand the phone back to the mother with sweat running down the screen, but she didn't seem to mind. I drank 2 liters of water, and then packed 8 more into my bags. The couple came outside to see me off and gave me a cold green soda for the road. They were nice people. I hope that hotel works out for them. Late in the afternoon, I left the road following a tractor path in search of a place to sleep. Out in the farmland, I found a spot in a peaceful grove of trees along the bank of a dry river. I filled the evening lying in my hammock, watching the lingering sunset and appreciating the silence. June 14th, 2013. Everything is leaking. Sleeping in my hammock is colder than lying on the ground. The ground retains my body heat while the air around my hammock is constantly replaced. To keep myself warm, I put a 3/4-inch air mattress in my hammock, which I inflate as much as I can to create a flat platform for my back. The mattress used to work great, but since Ukraine, the air escapes over a 6-hour period while I sleep. I have a patch kit, but the leak is so slow that I haven't been able to find a hole. A more concerning leak is coming from the big toe on my right foot. The area is swollen, and yellow pus has been crusting the inside of my sock for days. The problem is the same as I had 2 weeks ago on my left foot. Loosening my shoelace worked then, so I'm trying that for this foot too. My trailer tire is also leaking. I didn't realize until I got to camp yesterday that the tube had almost no pressure. All day long I had a dragging pace. Usually I blame my bike when I'm going slow, even though my tired legs are always the culprit. Having learned that lesson, I assume my legs were tired yesterday too, but this time the problem actually was my bike. I patched the tube last night, but the tire was flat again this morning. I found a second hole, patched the tube a second time, then proceeded to tear the stem while I was pumping. The stem couldn't be fixed, so I got out a spare tube and started all over. The whole exercise was a frustrating start to the day. I left my campsite pedaling into a stiff headwind. The land was flat, but to get anywhere, I had to pedal as hard as if I were climbing a steep mountain. I decided to alternate an hour of biking with an hour of resting, with the hope that the wind would subside before I ran out of energy. I played guitar on the first break, napped on the second, and read a book during the third. In some ways, I'm on a very leisurely adventure. A tick, crawling on my neck, woke me up this morning. I tossed the parasite out of my hammock, wondering if that was the only one. I hadn't been thinking about ticks, but this evening, I couldn't help but notice I was walking through a lot of tall grass and brush to get to my camping spot. I would check for them on my body, but I never take my clothes off. Instead, I've decided to simply do what's easiest and ignore the possibility altogether. I'll just find them on me when I feel them. Today stands out as the first day of the journey that I did not speak to anyone. The road skirted around towns, and I didn't stop at any stores or gas stations. Perhaps the more interesting perspective is that I've talked to someone new every day for the past 120 days. I'm both out here alone and more social than I have ever been. June 15th, 2013. Visiting Samara. In small ways, I'm beginning to absorb the Russian language. International words like ketchup, cafe, and vodka are spelled phonetically in the Russian alphabet, which allows me to see the translation. Brand names are also good for this. I saw an IKEA today and learned that a backwards N is the same as an I. I feel like I'm learning to read again, which is very exciting. The first word I came to understand is magazine. I see the word written on the signs in front of the little shops where I buy food. One word is a small start, but using a questioning tone, I can now ask where to find a store. The road brought me into the city of Samara. I pulled into a park to eat lunch, but there were no benches to sit on. This has been typical in the Russian cities. The public spaces have a minimalist aesthetic, free of art, plants, or even places to sit. They are little more than large paved areas, uninviting and typically empty. I can't tell if this style of park is born from Russian values or if what I'm seeing is merely a reflection of the economic circumstances. Perhaps they are built specifically to be used for military parades. They would be good for that. The highlight of Samara was a 223-foot tall Russian R-7 rocket pointing skyward over the entrance to the Aerospace Museum. The monument to science and engineering was a welcome change from the memorials to war. Though, that particular rocket was designed to carry nuclear warheads before being repurposed to launch satellites. Just outside of the city, I stopped at an enormous shopping mall to buy extra spare tubes. 3 large, multi-level buildings were connected by skyways, and I walked a long way to find a sporting goods store. After making my purchase, I realized I had no idea how to get back to where I'd left my bike. I tried retracing my steps, but I'd been wandering aimlessly to find the store, and everywhere I went looked kind of the same. I walked for over an hour before finding my bike. Across all of Europe, I've never felt more lost than I did in that mall. I got on the highway following signs for the city of Ufa. The first one said I was 430 kilometers away. A mile later, a second sign pegged the distance at 440 kilometers. A third sign said 460 kilometers, and a fourth sign guessed 420 kilometers. The distance is not actually important to me. I'll arrive when I get there. This evening, I ran from the road and made my way into a strip of forest between farm fields. My hammock is hanging between rows of thick white trees. Underbrush with bright green leaves grows up around me. This spot is quite beautiful. I laid in my hammock to eat my dinner and looked up through the branches at the blue sky beyond. June 16th, 2013. Gary. I could see my breath in the cold morning air. I wanted to sleep until the day warmed up, but I had camped too close to the road. The loud trucks that woke me through the night also wouldn't let me sleep in. I got up and pedaled into a bucolic landscape of green rolling farm fields interspersed with patches of open forests. A few miles into my ride, I stopped to snack on a package of Amerikanski cookies that I purchased at a gas station. They turned out to be chocolate chip. I never thought of chocolate chip cookies as distinctly American, but I don't mind claiming them. I was getting ready to leave when another cyclist pulled up on a loaded bike, a man named Gary. He had a long gray beard and looked to be in his 50s. Most notably, he wore a black bowler's hat. Gary was friendly, and his English was just good enough to have a conversation. He said that his trip began in Munich a month ago and would take him across Russia, then maybe as far as Alaska. I offered him a cookie, then we started down the road together. An hour later, Gary was lost somewhere behind me. His bike looked very heavy, and though I waited, I never did see him again. At this point, I have mixed feelings about traveling with someone else. I like the simplicity of not having to consider anyone but me, though a couple of days' company might be good too. Maybe I'll see him again. There is only one road, and we are both on it. Tonight, I'm between fields in a strip of white aspen trees. As I hung my hammock, I noticed a white spider camouflaged against the tree bark. How beautiful for a spider to evolve to match the color of the forest. June 17th, 2013. Pretty hills. The rolling hills grew larger through the day as I edged into the Ural Mountains. From the top of each climb, I was struck by the lovely view. Delicate clouds drifted across the deep blue sky. Tall, feathery wisps of golden grass shone in the sunlight. Butterflies danced on the wind. Getting into the hills has been particularly good for my butt. I'm blistered and bruised from so much sitting, but in the hills, I naturally stand more often. After just a couple of days, my butt is in a lot less pain, but my legs are much more tired. Powering up the climbs has been hard for me. The past 5 weeks of flat roads have acclimated me to a much gentler resistance. I passed a few small towns today, but they were always a couple miles from the highway. Yesterday was the same. I haven't detoured into the villages, but I do visit the truck stops. I sit with my bike in the shade, and usually, someone will come over to say hello. Today, a trucker approached me to say that he had seen me biking yesterday too. I tried to ask him if he saw Gary as well, but he only spoke Russian, and I wasn't able to make myself clear. I was wet with sweat when I pulled into a truck stop this afternoon. The temperature had been nearly 100 degrees for hours, and both my pants and shirts were striped with salt lines and covered in road grit. I felt like such a mess that I was embarrassed to go into the store, but my thinking changed when I saw a rotund trucker climb down from his cab wearing only soggy white underpants. I realized that we were all struggling out here in the heat together, and I could hardly be held accountable for my appearance. Feeling blameless, I walked into the store to buy ice cream. At least I was wearing pants. This evening, I pushed my bike far from the road to find this beautiful, quiet spot. I hung my hammock where I can look out at the dark farm fields and star-filled sky. I feel wonderful and tired. June 18th, 2013. Crows. I've crossed a religious border between Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodoxy. The line is less distinct than a state border, but the churches are a giveaway. Inside, the art no longer focuses so specifically on the gruesome death of Jesus. Instead, the interiors are gaudy, decorated liberally with gold foil and flourishes of neon lights. The walls are covered in brightly painted scenes with characters in such multitudes that they evoke a clear feeling of clutter. The crosses have changed too, from the Roman Catholic T to the three-bar cross of Eastern Orthodoxy. Even the church steeples are a different shape. The sharp spires of Western Europe have been replaced by tear-shaped domes covered in polished gold. The tear shape and mirror finish has the effect of creating a beacon that directs the sun into the eyes of all who look. They are blinding and stand out from miles away. I carried on climbing over low hills on weary legs. I was going slow, but some of the trucks were barely faster. They crept past me with black smoke pouring from their tailpipes. I would try to hold my breath until the air cleared, but on the steep hills, I would still end up gasping in a lungful of exhaust. During the hottest part of the afternoon, I rejoiced to find a spring flowing steadily from a thin copper pipe stuck into a hillside. I drank with abandon and delighted in rinsing my face. I lingered to enjoy the feeling of abundance created by the flowing water. For as long as I stood there, I could drink as much as I wanted. I have not seen much wildlife other than birds, and mostly crows. Dead trees along the road will occasionally be the home to hundreds of them. Their black squawking mass fills every branch. There are so many that one will inevitably get killed by a passing truck. Some of the living birds fly to the road to eat the dead, and they too are killed. Eventually, a dozen birds are ground to a paste in the middle of the lane, while 100 more look down from the trees and scream. I bicycled past this sad, gruesome scene again this afternoon. I needed to find a place to sleep, but pedaled another hour to be sure I was far away from the mournful creatures. Eventually, I pushed my bike into a narrow strip of forest between the farm fields. June 19th, 2013. Honey. I've started seeing honey stands. They congregate in groups at the gas station and crossroads. I saw as many as 10 of them together, each stand within arm's reach of the next. I wanted honey, but I felt that buying from one would disappoint the other 9. I decided the fair thing to do was to keep going and disappoint them all equally. An hour later, I bought a jar of dark golden honey from a guy parked by himself. I surprised him when I pulled up silently on my bike. All of the car doors were open, and he was lying in the back seat with the radio on. Along with the honey, he gave me a small handful of pollen pellets that collect on the legs of the bees. They are half the size of a rice grain, and the colors of flowers. Soft yellow, orange, and pink. The slightly sweet pellets broke into a powder as I chewed them. For much of the day, the road was only 2 narrow lanes, which made passing difficult for the trucks. They would line up behind the slowest one, drafting to save fuel, and ready to pass when the busy road allowed. This way of driving obstructed the view of all the drivers except for the man in front. When the first truck moved over to give room, the rest would follow like a snake without ever seeing what they were avoiding. As they roared past, I rode the white line and watched closely in my rear-view mirror. Each passing truck required me to make a split-second decision whether to dart off the road or trust that they would move. The situation was undeniably dangerous, but in the moment I felt calm and in control. After months of practice, I've become quite good at playing in traffic. I was getting stomach pains in the afternoon. I may have been overheating or dehydrated. Perhaps something was in the unfiltered spring water I filled my bottles with yesterday. Or maybe the unrefrigerated cheese I've been eating had affected me. The pain was sharp, but I managed to pedal for a couple of hours more until finally setting up camp in a strip of trees between farm fields. I only began to feel better after an hour of resting and drinking water. Not a breath of air is blowing, and just lying here in my hammock, I'm dripping with sweat. June 20th, 2013, Ufa. I arrived in the city of Ufa this afternoon. The highway brought me to a busy intersection without a traffic light. I waited for 20 minutes before sprinting through a narrow gap in the cars. For a Russian city, the experience didn't even seem out of place. I found a hostel and walked in to see that the clock hanging in the lobby was 3 hours ahead of my bike computer. I'd crossed 2 time zones without noticing. Seemingly, more than just losing track of time, I've lost any reason to keep track in the first place. Another touring bike was parked at the front door, one that I recognized. Gary, from 5 days ago, had beat me there. I underestimated him, deceived by his long gray beard. The first day we met, he biked late into the day and passed me while I was camping. He called out into the trees looking for me, but I set up my hammock too far from the road to hear him. He's been ahead of me this whole time, and was even fast enough to arrive at the hostel yesterday. In the evening, we went on a walk together to find a bike shop. Gary needed tires, and I wanted more tubes. The city was plain, with the vast majority of buildings being simple white rectangles, efficient and dull. I've become worldly enough to know that they looked very Russian. I talked to Katie tonight. We are approaching the opposite sides of the earth. The sun over her is illuminating the moon over me. She has started writing a research paper and was working when I called. Later, she's meeting a friend at the climbing gym. I miss climbing with Katie. I always liked watching the way she moved. The hills these past few days have exhausted me. I was planning on resting at the hostel tomorrow, but I like Gary's company, so I told him we can go together in the morning. I'll try to sleep a lot tonight, though this old mattress I'm on is much less comfortable than my hammock. June 21st, 2013, biking with Gary. Gary and I left Ufa together. The ride was easy with a decent road and few hills. The fields that I've grown accustomed to seeing were gone, replaced by a grand forest of spruce, fir, pine, and aspen. I've reached the southern edge of the taiga, the world's largest biome which circles the earth like a crown. The new landscape was a welcome change. Biking with Gary was a nice change too, though I'm reminded that there is compromise in relationship. He is slower and takes frequent short rests, while my habit is to stop every couple of hours for a long break. Today, we kept to his pace to better deal with the heat. The temperature hovered around 100 degrees, and I drank so much water that my bike was noticeably lighter by this evening. In the afternoon, I was with my bike at a truck stop when a woman approached me to ask where I was going. I told her Mongolia, and she raised her hand to her forehead in astonishment. Feeling inspired to help, she pulled 2 boiled potatoes out of a plastic bag and placed one in each of my hands. I thanked her, and when Gary came back outside, I shared the bounty. We sat next to each other on the curb in front of the truck stop, eating the warm potatoes. The moment was a happy one. Today is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. The sun dropped over the horizon at 10 o'clock, and the light lingered for another hour. This far into my journey, I'm struck by how much the sun has become a character in my life. I spend every waking moment under the fiery gaze. The first rays in the morning wake me up. During the day, the star becomes my compass. And across months, I've now watched the burning sphere climb to a high point in the sky. I pay attention because the sun's presence is impossible to ignore. I have little doubt that the first story of all mythos was told about the sun. Created at the dawn of humanity, the tale would have been the first attempt at explaining the mysteries of the universe. The collective knowledge of the human race would require another 300,000 years to set the record straight. This evening, I got my hammock set up on the edge of the forest, and Gary has his tent next to me. We followed a quiet dirt road to get here, but I'm instinctually uncomfortable that we are still in view of the passing cars. Gary has a big orange tent that is difficult to hide, and he seems less concerned about people finding him. Now that I'm not alone, I kind of feel the same way. June 22nd, 2013. So many hills. This morning, I found wild strawberries the size of peanuts. I ate a few, then showed them to Gary. He wouldn't try any, saying that he's afraid of getting worms. I hadn't considered that. The berries were deliciously sweet. I guess I'll find out if they were worth eating. At least once a day, I pass a little roadside market of open-air booths. Up to a dozen people will be selling all the same cheap gifts and snacks, along with one item that isn't sold at any of the other markets. These special items include dried fish, teapots, bread, giant stuffed animals, and beach towels printed with women in bikinis. The specialty items are unique to the market, but they are still sold by every vendor there. Today, rings are being sold, but the sales pitch is more elaborate. Between towns, I came upon a man pulled over with his hood up and waving for me to stop. Two more men and a woman were sitting inside the car. The guy said he needed money to buy gas and tried to sell me the ring off his finger, which was thick, gold, and embedded with large shining gems. The jewelry was either fake or cost $50,000. Either way, I didn't want a ring. He wanted me to inspect the quality and kept trying to pass the ring to me, but I wouldn't put my hand out. His sales pitch became more desperate and pleading the longer I stood there. Eventually, I needed to go, and biked away wondering if that was really the best way for four adults to make a living. Why didn't they set up a ring booth at one of the markets? Less than half a mile down the road, another car was pulled over with its hood up. As I pedaled past, two young men waved frantically for me to stop. Bright gold rings on their fingers gleamed in the sunshine. Not even the scammers get a monopoly around here. I was stopped by a father and son out sightseeing for the weekend. The son spoke English and asked if he could take my picture. He already got a picture of Gary from somewhere down the road behind me. While I posed with my bike, he asked a question that I get a lot. Why are you doing this? I know why, but even for me, I struggle to believe the answer. I said I'm here to ride my bike and sleep in my hammock. They looked at me skeptically, wanting more. I feel the same way. I left a really decent life, my career, my friends, Katie, all so that I could pedal and sleep. Stated so simply, I can't help but question my decision. I know that what I'm doing brings me great joy, but like these two men, I struggle to believe that is enough of a reason. Abandoning the life I had to do what makes me happy feels ultimately selfish. If I were forced to justify this journey, I could only point to the smiling people I leave in my wake. Certainly, the father and son were happy to spend a minute pondering my bike ride around the world. I got out ahead of Gary today and felt better to be going at my own pace. Every dozen miles or so, I'd wait for him at a gas station. The temperature was 100 degrees under the searing heat, and at each stop, we bonded over a shared love of ice cream. Like connoisseurs, we recommended our favorite brands and spoke at length about the preferences for ice cream on a stick versus in the form of a sandwich, chocolate dipped or plain, with or without nuts. My favorite Russian ice cream is called Lakomka, a vanilla log with a soft chocolate outside, the consistency of styrofoam. Through the day, we climbed a vertical mile, one short steep hill at a time. I felt exhausted and would have stopped sooner, but Gary's in more of a hurry than I am. He's traveling to a commune in eastern Russia where they don't consume alcohol, drugs, or even eat meat. He says the land is so clean that the people drink from the rivers. His birthday is in a month, and he's eager to arrive before then. At 10:30 p.m., the sunset was still lingering in the sky when Gary and I pulled into a dirt lot alongside the road. A man stepped out of a faded blue trailer home to greet us. A piece of spray-painted plywood indicated we found a cafe, but the guy obviously lived there too. He was exceedingly cheerful and a little drunk. I asked about a place to camp, and with the point of his finger, he sent us to a lovely patch of forest on a hill above his trailer. June 23rd, 2013. Pretty day in the Ural Mountains. There's a cultural tick that I've noticed at the Russian bus stops. Like bus stops everywhere, people look down the road while they wait. And in the plains, they see me coming for 10 minutes before I get to them. When I finally arrive, I'm completely ignored. Nobody turns their head or even follows me with their eyes. But as soon as I pass, I watch in my mirror to see a dozen heads pivot in unison as every person turns to look. I find this to be the perfect reaction. In Romania and Serbia, I didn't like how much attention I got. And at the same time, I silently judged anyone that didn't think I was interesting. In this way, I left myself no room to be comfortable. The Russian people have found a sweet spot. They both ignore me and give me the attention I desire. In the afternoon, a local man bicycled with Gary and I for a few miles. I'd been on this highway for over 800 kilometers, and Gary for 1,000. Today was the first time that either of us had seen another cyclist besides each other. We are pedaling for months, risking our lives in torturous heat to bicycle across the vast and unchanging Russian plain. Of all the people in the world, we're the only ones who want to be here. The road has not passed directly through any towns, and at this point, Gary and I have both run out of food. We are relying solely on the sporadic and questionable truck stop cafes. Twice today, I filled up on delicious baked bread stuffed with meat and vegetables. Gary is vegetarian and is having a harder time finding food. Yesterday, he didn't find anything to eat, and today he got a plate of cabbage with sliced tomatoes. I could see his frustration as he chewed on the dry leaves. I'm sure he was hungry. Since I met Gary, he has occasionally mentioned his doctor in weird contexts. He said he learned English from his doctor. He helped build his doctor's house. He told me his doctor recently got married. Today, I finally realized he was saying daughter. I tried to clearly enunciate each word for him, but he couldn't hear the difference. Gary actually has 2 daughters, both in their 20s. He started a relationship with their mother when the oldest was 4, and they split up a decade later. He's opposed to having children of his own, but was happy to step into the father role for the 2 girls. He left on this journey only because he felt both girls were stable and on their own. I asked Gary about telling people we are tourists. The word tourist is a universal word that is understood in every language I've come across, and Gary has noticed this too. We both say tourists because that is the easiest way to explain what we are doing, but the word doesn't feel exactly accurate. He thought for a moment before saying, "We're not even tourists because we don't visit towns. We are only drivers, just going and not stopping." He's right. I'm here for the driving, not the visiting. Tonight, after a full day of pedaling over hills, we pushed our bikes off the road and found a beautiful place to sleep in the forest. I've got my hammock hanging. Gary's tent is right next to me. June 24th, 2013, Asia. Gary wants to live in Russia, and so he's more active in practicing the language than I am. At one of our ice cream stops, he chatted with the cashier who told him that in February, a meteorite exploded over Russia and landed in the lake across the street. I remember seeing the dashcam videos in the news. The space rock burned across the morning sky, and the sonic boom broke windows on the ground. I even saw pictures of the snow-covered lake where the debris landed, which was suddenly right in front of me, now fully thawed. Stepping back outside, I looked upward suspiciously, checking for signs that the sky was about to fall. I was relieved to see that all the clouds appeared to be in the right places. The road through the mountains has signs marking the grade and length of every hill, but the grade was always wrong, and the lengths were consistently off by a kilometer or more. Someone went through the trouble of making and installing hundreds of these signs, but ignored the part that made them useful. Even on short hills, where the top was clearly visible from the bottom, the signs were obviously wrong. Doing nothing would have been better. At least the drivers wouldn't be deceived. Gary and I are deep in the Ural Mountains, which marks the border between Europe and Asia. Neither of us have ever been to Asia before, and we were both excited to arrive. Gary asked at a cafe where Asia begins, then relayed the man's reply. He said Russia is not Asia, only Kazakhstan and Mongolia are Asia. The cultural demarcation seemed to not match the geographical one. I had little hope that there would be a sign, but in the afternoon, I crested the last hill of Europe to discover a marker made of concrete, stone, and steel. One side read Asia, and the other side, Europa. Gary and I cheered and congratulated each other. I was glad he's with me to share the moment. I sat in the shade of the sign to reflect on the fact that I had just ridden a bicycle across the continent of Europe. The sense of accomplishment was amazing, and I was awash in a joyous feeling of pride. But I also wasn't done. My excitement for Asia pulled me forward, and I felt the momentum of 8,600 kilometers behind me. With one more pedal stroke, I began to roll downhill, beginning the crossing of another continent, a bigger one. Tonight, I'm in a grove of aspen trees with a magnificent wide view of the fields and forests. Clouds drift by. The sun is slowly setting. Honeybees dance between the wildflowers. The spot is beautiful, warm and serene. This is my first impression of Asia, and a good one. June 25th, 2013, Asian Hills. I had a tough day. The rough road surface and patches of hot bubbling tar dragged on my tires. The shoulder was so narrow that my panniers hung over the white line. When trucks squeezed past me, they kicked up dirt, which was blown sharply into my face by a stiff headwind. All day long, sweat stung my eyes. The mountains are behind me, but the aching fatigue they left in my thighs has yet to go away. I felt nauseous in the heat. My low back has begun to ache, the first signs that I'm fighting a cold. I labored forward, frustrated and uncomfortable. Gary seemed to be in his own process. We left this morning intent on getting far enough past the city of Chelyabinsk to find camping. After 7 hours of pedaling, we found ourselves downtown, still a dozen miles from where we might find a place to stop. My legs were exhausted, and I convinced Gary to stop at a shopping mall so I could call Katie. I needed her moral support. I could tell he didn't like being there, and he offered to stay with the bikes. I understood how he felt. After months of living like we have, being near a mall's raw consumerism has become objectionable. I didn't stay for long, though. When I called Katie, the sun was not yet shining on her side of the earth. She answered with a weak hello, and I softly said, "Good morning, Katie." Through a fog of sleep, she asked, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm very far away." The connection was lost before she could reply. I heard her voice, and that was enough to lift my spirit. I let her sleep. In the morning, she'll wonder if the call was a dream. Tonight, I'm in my hammock, snacking on Amerikansky cookies and watching leaves twitch in the wind. My stomach is better, the air is beginning to cool, and after such a hard day, I'm glad to be feeling so good. June 26, 2013. Restful day. Bike touring is a practice of going and resting. For two people traveling together, the ratio must match. Gary and I have not been a great fit in this way. He's in a hurry to get somewhere and motivated to ride until the sun goes down. Through these long days, we can fit in 10 hours of biking. I, on the other hand, am in no hurry. 6 hours of pedaling always seems like enough to me. This morning, our incongruent paces forced us to part. After sitting together and enjoying one last ice cream, Gary told me he needed to go. He said we all have our journey planned in our hearts. We are not on the same one. We shook hands, then gave each other a hug. I was sad to watch him pedal away. Traveling with anyone includes a challenge of relationship. Going alone presents a challenge of no relationship. I think we are both more comfortable with the latter. I suspect I'll never see him again. I pushed my bike into the forest and set up my hammock for an early lunch. As soon as I plopped down, I was happy to be on my own again. I felt exhausted and just needed to rest. Without Gary's impatience urging me onward, I passed the next 7 hours sleeping, eating, and playing guitar. While I was there, a white car pulled up to stop on the shoulder and 4 people climbed out, 2 men and 2 women. They didn't see me in the forest, and I watched as they began to frantically wave their arms to stop any passing vehicle. After a few minutes of getting no help, one of the men spotted me and jogged to where I was in my hammock. He spoke a little English, and with an air of desperation, he told me that they were out of gas. They needed money, and the man offered to sell me the ring off of his finger. I told him I didn't want to buy his ring, then pointed out that money would not solve the gas problem. I offered my diesel fuel that I use for cooking, but he wasn't interested, and tried again to sell me the ring. I rebuffed him a few more times before he went back to the car. The group became uncomfortable knowing I was watching them, and they soon drove away. I bicycled a few hours this evening before pulling onto a dirt road and pushing my bike into the forest. This is a good spot for a hammock, but I'm a little nervous I was spotted by a passing car. Seemingly, I only feel safe when no one in the whole world knows where I am. June 27, 2013. More rest. My legs were weary today. I was happy to be alone so that I could plod along at exactly my own pace. I traveled through a patchwork of forests and farmland. The clear blue sky in the morning became speckled with soft clouds by the afternoon. Traffic was light. As I go farther east, the traffic keeps getting lighter. The difference is noticeable with each large city I put behind me. At a gas station this morning, I stopped to fill my water and was quickly surrounded by a large, extended family on vacation. The many children poked at my gear. The grandfather tried to give me a gaudy chain with a plastic gold cross. I declined, but he persisted in his friendliness, offering me a drink of vodka instead. I said no again. The frantic children and the adults pressing in around me was overwhelming. I had to politely shoo them all away. I don't know where they are going, but they had been in the car for far too long. The gas station attendants noticed the interaction and were laughing. Across Russia, the gas station workers have been my main point of contact with the population. I like them and feel like I make a friend at every gas station I go to. Their long, dull shifts have instilled within them a subdued energy that is easy for me to be around. I'm slowly building the confidence to try to speak in Russian. The Russian word for bread is one that I've recently learned. Bread is my main source of calories, so I'm always running out, and I have been asking the gas pump attendants where I can find more. With the inflection of a question, I say, "Kleb?" Then with an exaggerated look of confusion, I point in several directions to indicate that I don't know where to find any. "Kleb?" I say again. No one ever seems to understand what I'm asking for. Perhaps my pronunciation is poor, or just wrong. Maybe they are confused as to why a guy on a bicycle would pull into a gas station, point randomly at the surrounding fields, and repeat the word for bread. I set up my camp in the early afternoon and fell asleep in my hammock. I slept for 5 hours and woke up with the sun just above the horizon. Feeling rested, I got up thinking I'd slept until morning. I was taking in the new day, beginning to pack up my gear, when I noticed the sun drop behind the trees. Through the rest of the long twilight, I cooked rice and cheese with a can of peas. I played guitar until a string broke. After that, I simply laid in my hammock, listening to the birds until dark. June 28th, 2013. Mosquito swarm. At a truck stop, I met a couple of bored young men in their early 20s. They lived in a nearby town and spoke English. One of them asked me what I thought of Russia. I said I like Russia. It's really nice here. He replied, Russia is not nice. It is shit. What do you like about it? His response caught me off guard, and I didn't have a quick answer for him. I've crossed 1,500 miles of flat farm fields in brutal heat. Every city looked gray and uninviting. The small towns were far from vibrant, and I was there at the truck stop because there is no other place to buy food. I could understand their sentiment, but I wasn't about to agree with them. I said, the people here are very friendly. As if to prove my point, a man came over just then to give me a small Russian flag to hang from my trailer flagpole. I added the flag below the yellow triangle that was already there. Flying a flag that is not my own nationality does feel odd, but I don't want to reject the man's gift, and perhaps the flag will bring me goodwill somewhere down the road. I was joined on my ride today by large black flies nearly the size of honeybees. Between 1 and a dozen of them would hover around my handlebars for miles without ever landing. With little headwind, I was able to race ahead of them, but more always found me. Sometimes, the fly would be lost to a passing truck, splattered on the windshield, or bounced off onto the road in front of me. The flies annoyed me, but I never liked seeing them killed in that way. The idea of being taken out by a truck was hitting a little too close to home for me. In searching for a place to sleep tonight, I followed a dirt track away from the road, then ducked into a dark forest. I moved quickly in moments when no vehicle could see me. Once there, I came up against the densest swarm of mosquitoes I've ever experienced. They were a buzzing cloud. I was inhaling them. I could kill a dozen at a time just by clapping my hands. They covered my shoulders and bit through my shirt. I tried to defend myself, but I was overwhelmed. In a craze, I turned and ran, pushing my bike at a sprint to get back to the road. I was shaken and pedaled for another hour before I was ready to try again. I learned my lesson, and for the second attempt, I prepared myself. I put on my raincoat and cinched the cuffs around my gloves. I wore my rain pants and tucked them into my socks. Finally, I put on my head mesh and cinched the fabric around my neck. The mosquito swarm descended as I entered the forest. They covered my clothes and buzzed in my ears, but only a few actually managed to penetrate my defenses, to bite my wrists and ankles. Once I zipped into my hammock, I massacred all the mosquitoes and flies that had followed me in. This has become a nightly ritual that I'm not proud of. Tonight's slaughter was particularly large. June 29th, 2013. Siberia. When I woke up, my neck was so painfully tight that I winced to look left. I'd injured myself in my sleep and was forced to ride all day with my head turned slightly off-center. Of all the ways I might have gotten hurt out here, a sleeping injury is the one that I would choose. I packed my things quickly as the mosquitoes swarmed around me. Within a couple of miles, the forest was behind me, and so were the bugs. I spent the rest of the day crossing flat farm fields with only diffuse patches of woodland. The road was narrow, and the traffic was light. A cool wind blowing out of the north clashed with the hot sun shining through the bright white clouds. I'm now entering Siberia. which I know only to be famously cold and remote. The weather today was quite nice, but I did get a glimpse of how empty this area is. After passing the town this morning, I went for hours without seeing a building of any kind. In the United States, I would always expect to see individual houses dotted across large swaths of land. But in Russia, I've only seen people living within towns. For cultural reasons or out of necessity, nobody here lives in isolation. In the early afternoon, 3 people on touring motorcycles stopped to say hello. When they took off their helmets, I recognized them as a group I met 7 weeks ago at the gas station in Ukraine. The kind woman who bought me orange juice was injured along the way. She'll be okay, but had to fly home. The other 2 carried on, and later met a third man that had joined them. They had been trying to reach Mongolia, but never did get there, which left me a little concerned about my own chances. Now they're heading home, back to Finland. I felt happy to see them again, like running into old friends. I found a great spot to sleep tonight, near a lake, quiet, far from the road in a copse of aspen trees. I tucked into my hammock, warm and comfortable, and listened to the birds sing the sun to sleep. Each evening, I turn on my tablet to write this journal, and as the device boots up, the black screen serves as a mirror for half a minute. This is the only time I see my reflection. I look shaggy, my beard is filling in, and my unkempt hair is getting long. Day by day, I'm watching myself become wild. June 30th, 2013. A pristine day. After bicycling for an hour, I pulled off the main road to find a quiet spot in the grass to sit and eat breakfast. I leaned back against my bike to bask in the warm sun. Fresh summer air swirled around me. Fields and forests spread out across the land. I tried to imagine anywhere else I would rather be, or something different that I wanted to do, but I couldn't. I was comfortable and happy, without trouble or worry. I felt no rush to depart, nor was I compelled to stay. My thoughts did not wander. They had nowhere to go. With nothing to do, I simply sat there, present and still, feeling a wonderful sense of contentment. I held on to the sensation for 5 minutes, until I ate the last of my bread, and would have liked a little more. Occasionally, a cheer of joy is compelled out of me, usually by whipping fun downhills or a scene of natural magnificence. Today, all that was required was a left turn. I've been following the M5 highway for the past 1,300 kilometers, and for the first time in 16 days, I turned onto a different road. I'm taking a detour around a little section of Kazakhstan to avoid crossing the border. The new road looked the same as the old, and felt the same, but just knowing that the name was different was enough. Out here on the endless plains, anything new gets me quite excited. Again tonight, I am in an open forest of tall white trees and knee-high grass. I made rice with a can of baked beans for dinner, then ate lying in my hammock with the food resting on my chest. I started eating this way to avoid the swarms of black flies, but now I prefer to recline while I'm eating. In the cool evening air, the warm pot feels good against my body. Not nearly as good as snuggling up against Katie, but I'm working with what I've got. July 1st, 2013. Wild hares. At 3 a.m., the first drops of a storm began splashing through my bug mesh. 1,000 mosquitoes were waiting for me as I scrambled outside to put on the rainfly. I worked quickly, but my shoulders were drenched before I crawled back into my hammock. The black night and patter of rain quickly lulled me back to sleep. By morning, the clouds were breaking up, and the world was dripping wet. Soon after I started biking, the road deteriorated into a broken sandy track. The trucks had to go so slow that they took a full minute just to drive past me. Their giant wheels ground the roadbed to fine gray dust that hung in the air and clung to the nearby trees and grasses. In some places, the dust was so deep that I had to get off and push, as if I were going through soft snow. Staying on my bike was tricky because the silt on the road obscured fist-sized stones, jarring potholes, and ruts that grabbed at my wheels. The trucks had the same problem. Many times, I thought the trailers were going to tip over as they swayed dangerously side to side on the uneven road surface. Several trucks were stuck in the soft soil, and one appeared to be abandoned. The gap without pavement lasted only 12 miles, but took me nearly 3 hours to cross. I'm on the main truck route across Russia, so I can only imagine the nefarious politics behind this one small section remaining unpaved. The heat was fierce today. At a gas station, I saw a group of men keeping cool by rolling up their white tank tops from the bottom, so that their round bellies were exposed to the breeze, while their chests were left covered. Men have worn their shirts like this all across Russia. Another way they cope with the heat is by wearing shorts that have a 1-inch inseam. On the hottest days, the masculine professions of farming, road construction, and trucking are full of guys wearing the equivalent of sports bras and booty shorts. The clothing is practical, but my American sentiment leaves me too modest to wear such revealing outfits myself. Tonight, I'm in a patch of aspen trees between farm fields. 2 wild hares have been chasing each other along the edge of the forest. They are much larger than rabbits and incredibly fast. When I arrived, they took off across the field, leaving a swirl of dust in their wake. They are back now and don't seem to notice me in my hammock. I've been watching them through the evening. They're a cute couple. July 2nd, 2013. More biking. I have a nylon food bag that I fill at grocery stores, then watch as the contents lessen with each passing meal. My perpetual task is to keep that bag from going completely empty, and through the cycle of filling and consuming, I've gained an acute awareness of how much I eat, which is a lot. Now, as I pass through cities, I can't help but think of the mountains of food being consumed. I see the food as well. Around every large population, I pass hundreds of miles of crops, a pasture for the people that can be seen from space. As I go east, the landscape has begun to reflect that the cities are thinning out. Forests disperse more thickly, and crops are giving way to grassland. The change is subtle, but I'm clinging to any change at all. After weeks of endless farm fields, I'm craving new scenery, maybe a place with towns, or a hill. Even turns on the road would be nice. To get through the day, I focus on the motion of my pedaling, the fresh air, and the sunshine. Tonight, I have my hammock hanging between 2 stout aspen trees. While resting through the evening, I wrote a poem, then read out loud to the applause of quaking leaves and the cheers of chirping birds. Where the horizon can never be attained, nor the sky ever touched, where the wind is unrestrained, and the sun will not be rushed. This is the place where I will always be, filling the space that is made of me. July 3rd, 2013. High North. I've been pedaling into a headwind for the past 700 miles. I feel as if I'm in a battle of wills with a weather pattern. The wind blows hard out of the east all day and mocks me by subsiding just as I'm setting up camp for the evening. I've been exasperated by this dynamic for 2 weeks, and today I made the strategic decision to sleep through the afternoon, then bicycle until dark. My plan worked perfectly. The sun was getting low when the wind finally died, but I managed to bicycle a couple more hours at twice the speed I was going in the morning. The weather has become ever present in my life in a way that I never experienced when I was living inside. Through immersion, I'm learning to read the signs and recognize the patterns of the natural world. I feel this understanding happening intuitively, like a child learning their first language. The experience is fun. I felt so pleased today when the wind stopped just as I had predicted. Early this morning, I visited Abetskoye, the most pleasant town I've seen in Russia. The streets were clean and had sidewalks. People were out walking and smiling. The wooden homes were painted in soft colors, and the backyards filled in with gardens, greenhouses, and weathered outbuildings. There were hardly any of the drab, gray apartment buildings that fill the cities and larger towns. This community seemed humble and happy. I stopped at a grocery store to buy food and a 2-liter box of orange juice, or more accurately, orange drink. Real orange juice is not available. Fruit in general has been hard to find, so I'm left to savor the sweet flavor of generic juice alternative. I strapped the orange drink to my pannier, and when I stopped for breakfast 10 miles later, the jug was gone, bounced off unnoticed. I sat down feeling dejected, perhaps more than the situation warranted, but the temperature was in the high 80s, and I was looking forward to chugging sugary water. To cheer myself up, I got out a package of Amerikansky cookies. I was trying a new brand, which wasn't very good, so I had to eat a lot of them. I was also counting on the juice for fluids. My water ran out in the morning, so I slowly grew thirstier through the hot day. 50 miles passed before I found a cafe for a refill. My legs were tired when I got there, and I was ready to be done for the day. I followed a dirt road away from the highway to a quiet grove of aspen trees, and set up my hammock with a wide open view of the sky. I watched as the light of the setting sun painted the cloud bellies orange, then pink and red. Shadows from somewhere over the horizon appeared as long dark streaks across the sky. The show was magnificent, and I felt joyful to bear witness. Today, I reached the farthest north point I will go on this journey. At 56 degrees north, I was at the same latitude as Copenhagen, Moscow, and Juneau. Arriving there felt significant, like I'd reached the demarcation of progress. I got a picture of myself marking the spot. The low sun is in my eyes. Behind me, a plain of thick grass and shrubbery stretches to the flat horizon. After trending north for 138 days, I feel good to be starting my journey south. July 4th, 2013. Bus stop shelter. I stopped at a cafe this morning. A family gathering in the parking lot was excited to meet me. They took pictures and even asked for my autograph. As a gift, they gave me a refrigerator magnet with an image of a Buddhist monastery called Ivolginsky Datsun. They said the place is 1,000 miles east of here, but worth the trip. I thanked them and added the magnet to my bag of treasures. A souvenir from a place I've never been. The cafe had Wi-Fi, and I was able to call Katie. We talked for an hour about the very different things we are doing with our lives. I still find our connection meaningful, even from the far side of the earth. But without discussing our situation directly, I can tell she is drifting from the relationship. I understand, given our circumstance, but the emotion around knowing that is weighing on me. Katie's the tether to the life I left behind, and the person that I want to return to. I hope she will still be waiting when I get there. The stiff Russian headwind met me outside the cafe. I carried on for a half hour before the situation became hopeless. I was barely able to go forward, and even staying upright was difficult. I took shelter in an empty bus stop constructed of corrugated steel and concrete, the same brutalist style prevalent across Russia. The wind hammered against the unmoving walls, and for the first time, I appreciated the practicality of the construction in spite of the dreary appearance. I settled in as rain arrived in sideways streaks. To avoid the spray, I huddled in the back corner with the spider webs. During the second hour of my refuge, I had an unexpectedly beautiful experience. I felt a peaceful happiness, undistracted and without need for distraction, in want of nothing, and pulled in no directions. While the wind screamed, I was awash with the feeling of serenity. I entered a state of perfect patience. Without anything vying for my time or attention, I could be still forever. 4 hours later, I had eaten most of my food, and the time had come to leave. The last of the rain was clearing out, the wind had dwindled to a breeze, and I was no longer content to be still. I biked a few more hours before leaving the road to set up camp in the forest. As my light faded, I cooked noodles and retreated into my hammock to eat. Hundreds of mosquitoes are now on the outside of my bug mesh, and so many are in the air that I hear a constant low buzzing sound coming from all around me. July 5th, 2013. Lots of relaxing. In times of difficulty or discomfort, I always ask myself, what can I learn from this experience? If I am to suffer, then let me grow in the process. After weeks of fighting the Russian headwinds, I thought the lesson was to overcome through force of will, to be stronger than the wind, and to persist with determination and burning thighs. Only yesterday, at the bus shelter, did the true answer come to me. In my moment of serenity, I became more patient than the wind. I stopped fighting, and in a lovely synchronicity, so did the wind. Today, the wind blew on my back, helping me along. I accepted the day as a restful one, and in the early afternoon, I hung my hammock at the edge of this farm field and stayed. This plain I'm crossing has been more physically demanding than I expected. If I were to bike 6 hours through mountains, I might roll downhill for 90 minutes. But on the flat, I have to pedal the whole time. I'm getting stronger, but I'm still worn out at the end of every day. There was no specific physical training that I did to get ready for this journey. I reasoned that if I were to bicycle 50 miles just once, I would prepare. But since I was about to bicycle 50 miles for hundreds of days in a row, I could simply begin, and eventually I would be strong enough. Katie never agreed with this line of reasoning, and so far, she is right. Maybe by the end, I'll be fit enough to start. July 6, 2013. Porcupine. I decided to take the bypass around Omsk. I wasn't up for another harrowing trip through a Russian city. I consider cities to be cultural hubs, and skipping them is short-sighted, knowing that I'll likely never be back. But at this point, I don't mind passing a city for the sake of a less stressful day. I could see Omsk to the north as I pedaled by. Gray apartment buildings and dirty factories lined the river. In truth, I was happy to continue through the same agrarian scene I've been looking at for a month. The routine of crossing endless fields has become comforting. I stopped to buy guitar strings at a large shopping mall on the outskirts of the city. There were 2 sprawling levels of shops to wander through. I went slowly, enjoying the air conditioning and admiring the mall's slick corporate sheen. Being there reminded me of the malls I went to in high school, except here, the signs were all written in Russian. While the landscape stays the same, I've started seeing the people change. European and Asian lineages separated by 50,000 years are now 2 masses of humanity pressing against each other. And for the past few days, I've been bicycling across the very soft line between them. The farther east I go, the more people I see with blended lineage. And at some point soon, everyone will look Asian. Watching the transition is fascinating. Across many hundreds of people, I'm witnessing a slow morphing of faces. Tonight, there is a porcupine wandering near my campsite. I saw him when I was cooking and whistled so he knew I was here. The little guy froze in place for 5 minutes before moving off. Porcupines have such great defenses that their natural reaction to danger is to be still. Perhaps this is the reason I've seen more dead ones on the road than any other animal. The porcupine is back now, and seeing the quills, I'm concerned that my hammock is hanging a little too low. July 7th, 2013. Friends at the gas station. I bought a sleeve of cookies and a liter of milk at a gas station and sat in the shade to enjoy them. I took a bite of cookie, then a big swig from the carton. I winced at the flavor and spit out what I drank. The milk was thick and sour. I looked at the label to check the expiration and realized that I'd actually bought buttermilk. This was the second time I've done that. I'm still struggling to read anything in Russian. In the afternoon, I stopped for ice cream at a gas station. The friendly store manager invited me into her office to talk. I sat across from her small desk and she offered me some of her lunch, a cold chicken leg, sliced bread, and green tea. She only spoke a little English, but we used an online translator to help. I learned that she has 2 kids and lived in a town nearby. I had fun talking to her and told her that I appreciated that she made the effort. We didn't have a deep conversation, but I'm starved to talk to anyone at all. I fill the void writing this journal, which is a good listener, but doesn't have much to say. As I pedaled down the road today, I thought about being more directly focused on where I am heading in my life. Going through the motions of working a job and filling my evenings has never been hard for me, but I also never thought much about what I was trying to accomplish with that lifestyle. I was plodding forward, but to what end? I'm no longer going through the motions. I wouldn't be in this Russian farm field if I were. I've given myself a goal of bicycling around the world, and I've distorted my whole life to make that a reality. I'm beginning to understand what living with intention feels like. To plot a course, then attempt to get there with an effort and focus that I'm proud of. I like this way of being. I feel empowered in a way I never have before. With the sun getting low, I snuck away from the road to set up camp in a patch of forest among the farm fields. I enjoyed the evening resting in my hammock, taking pictures of flowers, playing guitar, and listening to the birds. For a long time, I did nothing at all, which I'm learning to really enjoy. July 8th, 2013. Hot dogs and hamburgers. I had a restless night. I dreamt that I was camping close to a house and thought I would be discovered. And another unsettling dream, my brakes were rubbing. Driven by my perpetual exhaustion, I've become hyper-focused on being efficient. The constant burning in my thighs has made me obsess over any little detail that will make bicycling around the world easier. Now my subconscious has turned a dragging brake pad into a nightmare. Rain fell intermittently through the night before clearing into a particularly delightful day. This morning, I watched sheer white pillars of light pierce the overcast sky to illuminate billowing clouds below. The sight was awesome. I thought to take a picture, but knew I wouldn't capture the grandeur. I stopped to simply appreciate the experience and let the moment become a memory. Late in the afternoon, I pulled into a small market to buy a 5-liter jug of water, enough to get me through another hot day. When I made the purchase, the woman at the register didn't have change for a $10 bill. Many of the small rural shops seemed to operate on the edge of solvency. To get change, I went next door to a cafe and bought fried bread with a sliced hot dog hidden inside. While I sat next to my bike eating, a man asked in Russian where I was going. I pointed east and said Mongolia. He nodded somewhat disinterestedly. The closer I get to Mongolia, the less impressed people are that I'm going there. I noticed the change happen almost day by day. To this man, I adjusted my story, and with a leaping hand gesture, explained that after Mongolia, I would go to China. His eyes widened, and he questioned if he had understood me. China? He repeated. Another man was there listening and chimed in. Kitai? Da, I said. Kitai. Repeating the Russian pronunciation of China. The first man searched his limited English for a way to express himself. After a long pause, he said, class. Super class. He went into the store, and when he returned, he gave me 2 more fried hot dogs and 2 fried hamburgers as well. I thanked him, and he hopped in his car and was gone. What I am attempting to do is so obviously difficult that people are compelled to help. Whenever they do, I get the clear feeling that someone is taking care of me. And because I'm helped so often, I feel as though humanity is taking care of me. I'm in the safe hands of everyone. This evening, I snuck away from the road into a forest of white trees. I do appreciate anywhere I can easily find a place to camp, and I like this spot. I've become quite comfortable in these Russian forests. July 9th, 2013, 10,000th kilometer. This morning I bicycled my 10,000th kilometer since starting in Portugal. As my odometer rolled over, I stopped there to appreciate how far I've come. Around me was a perpetual flat expanse I have yet to cross. White lines of salt on my sun-faded shirt mark sweatier days. My hair has become matted and clumped in thick strands. The tread on my tires has worn off. My progress is perhaps most obvious on my face, where my beard now fills in thickly on my neck and jawline. The inspiration to grow a beard is from a tradition I learned hiking the Appalachian Trail. The long-distance hikers started with clean-shaven faces, then grew their beards as they went. The fullness of the beard signaled to others how long they'd been on the trail. Months of effort were displayed on their hairy faces. I hiked that trail for 92 days, and now my beard is another 50 days longer than that. I wear the beard proudly, but I don't think I look very good. The other reason I keep my beard is that I'm trying to cultivate a look approximating wild and homeless. I do this for safety. The people that might think to steal from me must first decide if I have anything worth taking, and second, whether or not I'm going to fight back. Though, far from being intimidating, most people that see me are simply inclined to give me food. I saw black beetles crawling on the road today. I steer around them, but the cars aren't so kind. I like seeing the beetles. The experience of crossing the land feels intimate when I'm going slow enough to interact with the insects. Tonight, I snuck away from the road into a patch of aspen trees. Lush green grasses cover the ground. Butterflies are flitting on the breeze, and small brown lizards, as long as my hand, scurry about in the forest and fields. North America has field mice, and apparently Eurasia has field lizards. July 10th, 2013. More gifts. Over the past few days, the landscape has become wetter. I see water pooling near the road in puddles and small ponds. The fields have mostly been replaced by forests. There are more birds, quick small ones that fly as individuals in pairs. They dart across the sky, getting fat on the black flies that have returned in droves to pester me. This morning, I stopped at a gas station cafe to fill my water. 3 separate groups came to take pictures with me. One guy handed me a Sochi 2014 keychain with a hockey skate and the Olympic rings. A friendly security guard gave me tea and chocolates, and another Russian flag to hang from my bike. A sharply dressed businessman that spoke a little English was particularly interested in me. After a short conversation, he gave me his email and offered to take me to lunch when I get to Novosibirsk tomorrow. He was really a kind and friendly man, and before leaving, he gave me a box of chocolate cookies. I watched him walk halfway to his car, then stop and come back to reiterate something he mentioned earlier. With great sincerity, he told me to be careful. He said, "The people of Siberia are very nice, but you must be careful." I become unsettled whenever people speak to me with great concern for my safety. I feel as if I'm missing something, like I don't even realize that I'm in danger. For a few days afterwards, I lose my trust in others. I don't like feeling suspicious, but I'm unable to ignore a kind-hearted warning. And after talking with the businessman, I felt more on guard for the rest of the day. In the afternoon, I pulled off the road into one of the many patches of forest that grow across the land. I pushed my bike far enough to feel well hidden, then hung my hammock between 2 birch trees in a clearing that gave me a great view of the sky. This is a healthy forest with tall, sturdy trees, and thick grass growing underneath. I feel relaxed here. For dinner, I made a pot of rice with a can of kidney beans. Then I ate while enjoying a long orange sunset. July 11th, 2013, arriving in Novosibirsk. This morning, I was at a cafe to fill my water when the pre-made salad in the display case caught my attention. I haven't seen many fresh vegetables at these highway rest stops, and I was enticed to get one. My first bite tasted surprisingly pungent for a salad. Upon closer inspection, I saw that there were small chunks of pale fish flesh mixed in with the greens. I wondered how long the dish was sitting in the warm display case. I took one more bite, but not a third. As I was getting ready to leave, a man came up to me and said, "Hello, Jacob." I was completely surprised. He explained that I met his boss yesterday, the man that wanted to meet me for lunch. After he left, he was so concerned for my well-being that today he sent one of his employees to find me and offer help. He said if I needed anything, he could assist. A shower, water, new clothes. He even wanted to drive slowly so that I could follow him to his boss's house for a place to stay. I considered the offer. I'm planning on staying in the city for an extra day, but mostly I wanted my own room and no obligation to entertain. When I take a day to rest, I'm also trying to take a break from the attention I get. Everywhere I go, people want to know where I've come from. Only in a private room or taking a walk without my bike do I get to be anonymous. I also would have felt bad making the man drive ahead of me. I was still 3 hours from the city, and at least for me, driving a car at the pace of a bicycle is irritatingly slow. I politely said no to everything he offered. Hopefully, his boss will understand. When the man specifically tried to buy me clothes, I realized that the long-sleeve shirt I've worn every day to keep myself warm or block the sun has become noticeably tattered. Holes are beginning to form across my shoulders where the sun hits most directly. I haven't noticed them because I only take my shirt off to shower, and I haven't done that in a while. I inspected my shirt tonight though. The fabric has become thin and faded, and there are a few small tears. In keeping with my ship at sea metaphor, I plan to wear my shirt until I get back home, or until the wind takes the fabric from my body, whichever comes first. Biking into the city was typically hectic, a lot of sprinting while navigating and avoiding people and cars. I was glad to arrive at the hostel, which is actually a collection of random apartments within a few blocks from the office. The man gave me the key, then we walked down the road for 10 minutes to get to where I am staying. I've got a cot to sleep on, and there is space for my bike. The room isn't as nice as anywhere that I've slept outside, but will be just fine for tonight. July 12th, 2013. Visiting Novosibirsk. I talked to Katie this morning. We made tentative plans for her to meet me in North Vietnam, where we'll spend a few weeks, then fly home together. That is still 3 months and many thousands of miles away, but I'm glad she wants to join me. After talking to her and making these plans, I feel more confident that our relationship will outlast this bike ride. I spent the day resting in my room, appreciating being in a confined space where I could let my guard down. Staying here reminds me of the convenience of having a home. I woke up this morning knowing where I was going to be sleeping tonight. I went to the store without bringing everything I own with me, and the room has a chair. I so rarely get to sit in a chair. Novosibirsk is the last city I'll visit in Russia, and I'm nervous about what's ahead. I've come to appreciate the relaxing pace of crossing farmland and the convenience of eating at cafes. As I edge towards Mongolia, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. I don't expect to find access to the internet in Mongolia, meaning I'm about to be cut off from Katie and everyone else. The towns appear to be far apart, and I may struggle to carry enough food and water to get between them. The environment will be extremely remote, culturally foreign, and more physically demanding than anywhere I've been in my life. The path ahead is daunting. I'm fearful of what is about to be required of me. July 13th, 2013. Leaving Novosibirsk. I wasn't particularly excited to start biking again this morning. The room, bed, running water, and nearby grocery store were all calling me to stay. They reminded me of the life I left behind in order to do the most difficult thing I could think of. One day with a little bit of comfort, and suddenly, my whole endeavor no longer seemed fun. I numbed myself to the emotions I was feeling, trusted that I loved what I'm doing, and stepped out the door. Within a mile, my mood flipped. I was glad to be back on my bike, feeling the breeze and admiring the landscape. I did reach out to the businessman from the other side of Novosibirsk. He couldn't meet me because of a work emergency, so he sent his 23-year-old son in his place. We met at a restaurant on my way out of the city and sat for a nice meal. On his recommendation, I ordered a plate of pork chops, hamburger, steak and chicken that came with a shred of coleslaw on the side. The son spoke English well, and I was happy to have a conversation. He told me his father was in charge of the city's water system and was disappointed to not be with us. He had sent along a gift of bread, cured sausage, and 2 Novosibirsk refrigerator magnets. The son also gave me a thick wool sweater because he is worried that I would get cold in Mongolia. Like his father, he's very kind. I thanked him for everything, then got back on the road. I left town with a long line of traffic. For 25 miles, I biked on the shoulder past cars that were sitting still. Not until I was out of the city and enjoying the quiet landscape did my nervousness about Mongolia fade. At the hostel, I had the option to stay or go, but my apprehension became pointless once I stepped out the door. I'm not turning back, so I have no need to fear going forward. I'm now excited for the challenge ahead. This evening, I followed a tractor path away from the road to a patch of trees and tall grass growing near a lake. The water is shimmering in the evening twilight, and small birds are flying across the orange sky. I feel good to be back in my hammock. I'm far more comfortable than I was last night on the thin Russian bed. July 14th, 2013. Biking in the sun. This morning, I found a few dozen feathers and a big smear of blood on top of my plastic guitar case. I didn't find the rest of the bird. Either the fight happened right there, or something used that spot as a dinner table. Whatever the case, the creatures were only 2 paces from my head, and I never woke up. I rinsed away the blood, wondering if the bird's last day had been a pleasant one. Did she fill up on flies and sing joyfully while the sun set? Nature never cares about the individual, not the dead bird, any of the flies in her belly, or the silent creature that killed her. Life sustains life, and nature persists because everything dies. What happened on top of my guitar case was a sacrifice to that end. I'm deciding not to view the death as an omen, good or bad, but only as a reminder to enjoy today. I felt great when I started biking this morning. The day was bright, the road was smooth, and the terrain was finally changing. I started seeing streams instead of ponds. Occasionally, I climbed over the most modest of hills. The land was covered by a beautiful patchwork of forests, grasses, and crops. The traffic on the highway was consistent, and without a shoulder to bike on, I had to pay close attention. Swarms of black flies distracted me by darting into my eyes and nostrils. There were too many of them to rest comfortably, so I never stopped biking. By early afternoon, I had covered 60 miles and found a secluded camping spot along the bank of a slow-moving river. I took a walk to photograph flowers and enjoy the day. I thought to rinse off in the water but decided not to when I saw a snake swim from one bank to the other. For 3 months out of the year, this place has an average temperature of -20 Celsius. I'm surprised a snake can survive, or any animal for that matter. I was thinking about the harsh winters this morning when I regifted the sweater I got yesterday. I was at a gas station and gave the shirt to the workers. By the time the season changes, I'll be far south of here, but they'll still be pumping gas in the cold. July 15th, 2013. Summer biking. Today was another uneventful but pleasant day of biking. I crossed 61 miles of gentle farmland and forests. Traffic wasn't too bad, but I did have to dodge a couple of trucks along the way. At my first stop of the day, I filled my water from a gas station sink. Then a short distance down the road, I noticed the water was hazy and smelled like dirt. How many times am I going to ignore the lesson that sinks do not have clean water? I dumped the bottle and was thirsty until finding a drink in the afternoon. During the daytime, I'm completely exposed and vulnerable to the people of the world. At night, I isolate myself in total solitude, and between those two extremes is a distinctly important moment of transition that I treat with a sort of reverence. To sleep well at night, I need to not only be hidden, but know that nobody would even think to look. In order to feel safe, I must literally disappear without a trace. The transition begins by scanning the landscape for a spot that is hidden from the road, a sort of Zen koan that needs to be solved before every sunset. From the road, find a place that cannot be seen from the road. Finding that spot is a practice of intuition made more or less difficult based on the surroundings. Once I choose a patch of trees for further investigation, I must then leave the road to get to them. I first take off and pack away my bright green safety vest. I stand casually as the cars pass. Then, in a moment without any traffic, I charge into the forest, stopping only after I am a dozen paces into the shadows of the canopy. I lay my bike over and crouch down, scanning to make sure I wasn't seen. This can be quite thrilling, but doesn't have to be if the traffic is light. Once I am confident no one saw me, I go in search of exactly where to make my home for the night. Every day, I take to the task with the clear intention of finding somewhere beautiful. Truly, to sleep in beautiful places is the reason I am out here. Tonight, I'm in my hammock surrounded by lush green grass, leaves above, and blue sky beyond. I felt happy and was inspired to write a poem to Katie. You will always know me from a place I will never be, in a way I can never know. My heart pounds, but to my ears it does not. Your ear on my chest reveals quite a lot. Keep your ear there as your head gently rests. Follow my breath to feel me expand and contract. Not only when you rest, you know the rhythm of my chest when you give me a heavenly hug. Speaking of embrace, I'll wrap you in your place, a hug I can never receive. Your gentle caress tickles me. If I touch myself as delicately, the sensation is not nearly the same. When I sleep, if you are there, you see me while I am elsewhere, in a world of my own creation. In these small ways, you see, you always know me, in a way I can never know. July 16th, 2013. Rainy day in Russia. I awoke to overcast skies, and soon after, the rain began to fall. I watched as a cloud ahead of me opened up into a downpour. A gas station was positioned between myself and the wall of oncoming water. I raced ahead to beat the storm, but lost by half a minute. As the rain settled in, I pulled under the gas station awning to wait. The gas station had a repair shop, and the mechanic invited me inside for tea. As the electric kettle began to boil, A small wet finch flew in through the window to nest in the corner of the garage. Sounds of chirping birds mingled with the patter of rain on the tin roof. The mechanic smiled and indicated there were 3 babies in the nest. He was by himself and didn't have any work to do, so he set about trying to have a conversation. I showed him my photos from my trip, and he showed me pictures of his daughter. I pulled up my map so he could see my route. He explained that the farthest he has ever traveled is 50 miles down the road in either direction. He's never even been to Novosibirsk. I was surprised when he told me this. In 2 days on a bicycle, I would travel as far as he has gone in a lifetime. I suddenly felt very grateful to have the privilege to wander the earth. After an hour with the mechanic, we shook hands, and I left into an intermittent rain, which slowly soaked me throughout the rest of the day. Tonight, I'm in a patch of trees near the road, lying in my wet shirt and damp pants in order to dry them with my body heat, and also because I have nothing else to wear. July 17th, 2013. Super day. This morning, I packed up and left just as a herd of cows started wandering through. I hadn't gone far when the clouds broke open to reveal a single tree-covered hill poking over the horizon. The road joined a river, then began to climb. Only gradually, but that was enough to feel a sense of relief come over me. I had crossed the great Russian plain to reach the mountains once again. With a cheer, I pulled over to the side of the road to take in the moment. The horizon first became flat when I bicycled out of Moldova 67 days ago. I pedaled straight ahead through an unchanging landscape for weeks, then months, without being anywhere discernibly different. In all that time, the endless plain was marred by only the Ural Mountains. I rolled down from the last of those hills, and have been waiting to climb another for the past 23 days. Seeing the next hill up ahead overwhelmed me with joy and relief. My eyes grew moist as my emotions swelled. I've come to understand that the road forward and the road inward are parallel, finely balanced paths. As external trials become secondary, inner obstacles appear more pronounced. I felt this as I passed the days with my attention turned inward, deeply examining myself to the core of my being. The challenge would have been insurmountable if I didn't like what I saw, and as a tear ran down my face at the sight of a hill, I wondered if all those long hours hadn't also broken me in some small way. A tourist gift shop and cafe marked my arrival to the Altai Mountains. After posing for a couple of photos in the parking lot, I went inside to discover that the power was out and no one was working. Back outside, I found the employees gathered around my bike. I told them about my trip and answered questions. With their urging, I got out my guitar and performed for 8 people, my largest crowd yet. I received applause, but they were only being polite. The friendly chef went into the dark cafe and returned with a sushi roll for me. I looked at the pink fish, wondering how long the power had been out, and how long the trip had taken from the ocean to this rural Russian cafe 2,000 miles away. Ultimately, I was more hungry than worried, and the roll tasted delicious. The woman running the gift shop gave me a new t-shirt because she was concerned about the holes in the one I was wearing. I thanked her and put the new shirt on over top of the old ones. Later, I packed the shirt away in case I ever need something clean to wear. She also gave me an elastic bracelet of polished black stones. I thanked her for the gift and packed the piece of jewelry away with my other treasures from the journey. One of the women running the outdoor food stand filled my water bottles with hot tea and gave me 2 small loaves of bread stuffed with meat and 2 more filled with nuts and fruit. As she handed me the food, she told me I have a kind face. That's the second time I've been given that compliment in Russia, which I find to be very sweet. I thanked her and thanked her for the food as well. Soon after arriving in Russia, I made the decision to approach everyone I meet with a sincere kindness and innate trust. I have found that this way of being transcends culture and language. People see me acting this way and mirror the sentiment back to me. The experience is beautiful. I'm creating a world for myself in which everyone is trustworthy and kind. Before leaving, I got a picture posing with the 3 generations of women that had been so eager to help me. I'm smiling broadly and wearing my new shirt. My arms are spread around a young woman on my left and her mother and grandmother on my right, each of them with lovely faces of mixed European and Asian ancestry. They stood close enough that I could reach my arms around all of them, and when I touched their shoulders, I felt the length of time that has passed since I last had physical contact with anyone. The feeling caught me off guard. I didn't realize how much I'd missed the touch of another. Late this afternoon, I followed a path away from the road to a place near the river where I set up camp. Soon after I hung my hammock, a car came down the same way. I was hidden in the trees, but the people looked like they were planning to stay. I went over to say hello and met a young married couple and a guy with a torn-up shirt like me. They poured me a cup of beer from a milk jug and invited me to stay for the first campfire of my journey. Communication started off slow, but after an hour, we were managing pretty well. We found an easy conversation in the language of consumer goods. We both knew a lot of the same international brands, and we compared the cost of things in Russia versus the United States by writing numbers in the dirt. One of the guys worked as a gas station attendant. I talk to gas station attendants almost every day. They're always nice, and he was too. He told me that every 4th day he works a 24-hour shift and gets paid $40 for it. I told him the same job in America would pay him 5 times more, but still wouldn't be enough to live on. He asked if politicians are corrupt in the United States. I said they are, but have created legal ways to do so. He looked disappointed and said that the Russian politics don't even bother with that. Even methods of corruption seem to have a cultural identity. The group left sometime after dark. I retreated to my hammock to bask in the glow of their brief friendship and feel the continued elation of having crossed the Russian plain. The day has been so wonderful that I'm reminded to cherish this experience and the time that I have left on this journey. Now, I'm in my hammock listening to the distant sound of thumping house music. On the far shore, 200 meters away, there is a luxury hotel and dance club. The roof of the building has a brightly lit, 15-foot tall crown with a blue neon sign that reads, "Crown of Altai." The whole enterprise seems to be out of place in this otherwise quiet valley. The lights of the hotel reflect off of the river alongside the moonlight, and the music mixes with the gentle sound of rippling water. July 18th, 2013. Such pretty mountains. I continued traveling uphill along a large, fast-flowing river. I saw kayaks navigating the rapids before arriving at a packed tourist area. Traffic moved slowly past stands selling rafting trips, jet boat rides, food, towels, and anything else that seemed to fit the scene. Hundreds of cars were parked among the trees along the river. People were drinking and music was playing. Everyone seemed to be having a good time, but to me, the place looked hectic. I couldn't ignore how much trash was on the ground. I saw a man in front of me roll down the passenger window, then toss a plastic bottle onto the side of the road. I wondered how he justified himself. The towns kept getting smaller as I went farther into the mountains. The last one I passed was little more than a couple dozen wooden structures nestled between tall green hills. The houses were weathered gray, with window frames painted blue and white. Front yards were filled by gardens, and outhouses stood in the back. 3 young boys playing with a bike waved excitedly as I passed. In the afternoon, I leaned against a tree and slept while the clouds above grew dark. When the first stray raindrops woke me, I could already see the columns of rain falling in the distance. I raced down the road until I found a small side path that took me to a perfect spot to camp. There was even a picnic table. I hung my hammock and rainfly as quickly as I could, and squatted beneath them as a downpour arrived. Soon, there were white flashes of lightning popping off around me, close enough I could hear them sizzle, and feel the booming thunder. After an intense 20 minutes, the storm broke up, and I had pleasant blue skies for the rest of the evening. July 19th, 2013. A party. I watched the sun rise over the hills and burn through the morning mist. The road followed a river farther into the mountains, and in the late morning, I arrived at the village of Shebellino. I saw a stage with balloons, and a crowd was gathered in a large field at the edge of town. As I pushed my bike across the grass to investigate, an older man holding his grandchild came to greet me. I told him I had come from Portugal, and he immediately took me to where the food was being prepared, then handed me a bowl filled with chunks of meat from 2 buckets. One of them lamb, and the other I couldn't identify. I asked the man, and he made a riding motion, like he was on a horse, and a braying sound like a donkey. I'm still not sure what I was eating. A short time later, the daughter of the grandfather came to talk to me. She had taken English in college, and we were able to have an easy conversation. She told me I arrived for the town's 180-year anniversary. We walked towards the stage where people were taking turns singing and giving speeches. She introduced me to a few of her neighbors, and one of them handed me a toddler. The group laughed as I awkwardly held him. He faced away from me, sitting on my forearm while I cradled his body against my chest. How easily they trusted me was very sweet. I enjoyed being around all the happy people and stayed for a couple of hours. The grandfather invited me to sleep in his home for the night, but I declined. I'd arrived early in the day, and more than anything else, I wanted to keep biking through the beautiful mountains. In the late afternoon, I slept sitting up at a bus shelter while I waited for a storm to pass. I got started again into a drizzle, then chased a blue hole in the clouds for an hour before I was under the sun. The day ended with a steep 6-mile ascent that left me dripping with sweat and breathing hard to get to the top. My legs are exhausted tonight. I stopped to hang my hammock for the night in the pine forest just above the pass at 5,500 feet. I'm at the source of the river that I've been following for the past 130 miles, from wide, fast-moving waters all the way up to the nearby spring trickling from the mountainside. I do love following rivers, downhill more than uphill, but that will have to wait for tomorrow. July 20th, 2013. Things are breaking. I started biking this morning straight into a long, winding downhill. Mountains grew taller around me as I descended into a broad valley. I warmed up slowly in the cool air. Traffic continues to thin out, and today I was passed by about 30 cars an hour. After months contending with the endless cars and speeding semi-trucks, I felt like I had the road all to myself. I could let my guard down a little bit and lose myself in the scenery. Without all the noise, I was able to hear the quiet. In the late afternoon, the road left the river to climb steeply up and over a ridge. The view became more spectacular as I went higher, and I wasn't the only one to notice. At the pass there was a parking area with a few dozen cars. People found boulders to climb on for pictures and walked along the ridge. Very noticeably, covering all the trees and bushes, were thousands of strips of white fabric tied onto all the branches as high as a person could reach. I don't know the cultural significance of tying these ribbons to the plants. Perhaps the fabric strips were deeply meaningful. But from my perspective, the place looked to be covered in litter. I was reminded of the child's prank of throwing toilet paper rolls into trees. Moving past the crowd, I found a quiet vista where I could sit unbothered. I played guitar, though the songs were taken away by the wind. I left the crowd behind and descended into a rugged valley to look for a place to camp. I've got my hammock hanging with a stream winding around me on 3 sides and a steep slope boxing me in on the 4th. I like this spot because I won't be bothered by the stray horses I've seen grazing across the green, unfenced valleys. This morning, I watched 3 of them walk through a gas station. My gear is beginning to break down. I can feel the bearings going bad in my right pedal, causing a little wobble with every rotation. My bike computer stopped working this morning. I decided I liked the idea of not measuring myself, and for the rest of the day, I felt liberated from counting my speed and distance, so I got the computer working again this evening. My hammock is also broke. Just after I laid down, the soft webbing that wraps around the tree ripped. I fell to the ground, landing on the grass with a thud. Expecting this was coming, I've made a habit of checking for sharp stones or branches under my hammock. I tied the webbing back together and now have a shorter tree strap. When I started, I did not expect my gear to be breaking down like this. Either I've overestimated my equipment or underestimated the wear and tear of bicycling around the world. July 21st, 2013. Cheers. I continued this morning through a magnificent half-mile wide valley with 1,000-meter tall ridges running on both sides. The snaking river on the valley floor was itself 400 feet across. Even larger mountains, with jutting cliffs, filled the horizon ahead of me. I passed forests and grassland, with cows and horses grazing alongside the road. Distant villages of a few dozen houses looked comically small in the grand landscape. As I passed one field of boulders, I was called to investigate the largest one, a behemoth chunk of granite brought there by a glacier, then abandoned after the last ice age. The rectangular shape looked like a toppled monolith. At the broken end was a flat surface where I discovered petroglyphs of antlered animals scratched into the stone. The boulder was the most obvious tall feature across the wide flat valley. I climbed up to sit on top and admired the magnificent view. From millennia ago until modern times, hunters would have sat in that same spot, scanning for antelope. I don't often get to share a seat with the 100 generations that came before, but in that spot, I surely was. I looked out at the mountains and the clouds beyond, the same view they would have seen. I stopped to eat breakfast at a high point overlooking the river, and while I was there, 2 local men came down the road on their horses with a white dog following close behind. Both were middle-aged, and when I could see their round faces and narrow eyes, I recognized that I had arrived at the part of the world dominated by Asian lineage. I've bicycled so far that I have become a minority. When the men saw me, they trotted their horses over to say hello. One of them tapped the side of his neck with 2 fingers. I've seen this gesture used since Ukraine to ask if I wanted a drink. The story I was told is that all vodka legally sold in the Soviet Union used to be government controlled. To keep bootleg vodka off the market, government officials traveled the country taste testing what they were being served at bars. To ensure that not just anyone was showing up asking for samples, the official taste testers were given a small tattoo, low on their neck, of a rose. To get free samples, they pulled their shirt collar to the side, revealing the tattoo. In time, the culture adopted tapping or flicking their neck to say, "Let's have a drink." I accepted the offer, and the 2 men climbed down from their horses. They wore old shirts and sweatpants tucked into mid-shin rubber boots. One of them stretched out his waistband and reached his whole arm down his pant leg until he's up to his shoulder. He came back up with a plastic 1-liter bottle half filled with something brown and homemade. Literally, bootleg alcohol. The flavor was good and not too strong. They each had a drink too, then mounted their horses to head down the road with their white dog following behind. I pulled into an overlook high above the confluence of 2 large rivers. A couple of British men were there with a guided tour that was getting ready to leave. They gave me a beer before climbing into their bus. The cold bottle was in my hand when they left, so I decided to drink the beer right there, admiring the view. A couple miles later, a van pulled off the road in front of me, and 2 men climbed out, completely happy to meet me. Neither of them had ever met someone from the USA, and they wanted to see what my passport looked like. I showed them a photocopy that I carry around for this very reason. One of the men was a captain in the army, and on the back of the photocopy, He wrote a note in Russian saying to let me through at the border, which was kind of him to do, but hopefully won't be needed. The day was still young, but both of the men had already been drinking. A bottle of vodka appeared, and the captain tapped his neck. We all drank 3 full shots together, and before each one, the 2 men raised their glasses to make a long, impassioned toast to me and my enduring adventure. I didn't understand what they were saying, but I could hear the sincerity in their delivery. A short time later, a van full of kayakers stopped to ask me what I was doing. One of them spoke English and invited me to their campground 50 kilometers down the road. I had almost gone that far already, but I woke up feeling strong, so I told them I would be there tonight. The camp was actually 60 kilometers away, and I climbed the whole way, spurred on by desire for company. Pulling into the campground 5 hours later, I surprised the people who invited me. They thought the ride might have been too far. There are a couple dozen kayakers at the campsite. They shared their dinner and handed me a 5th drink of the day, a Russian beer. I sat at a long plastic table with the group and spoke with a man from St. Petersburg who was fluent in English. I asked him to compare the 2 languages for me, and he quickly replied that Russian is a very emotional language, much more than English. I told him this surprised me because the movie industry has conditioned me to think of Russians as cold, unfeeling bad guys. He laughed in agreement. Yes, he joked, always named Boris. We discussed how the differences in languages influenced our perception of the world. I like the idea that there are Russian words for emotions that have no English equivalent. If I were to learn those Russian words, would they unlock new emotions, or simply give me the vocabulary to express what I was already feeling? His example is the Russian word toska, saying that the meaning was a sort of deep sadness that only a Russian could know. Just after dark, I was invited to join the campground banya, a Russian-style sauna consisting of a small wooden building with a porch and 2 inner rooms. The first inner room was a place to strip naked and had a bucket of cold water on the floor. The second room was smaller, much hotter, and more cramped. Stones cooked on a bed of coals in the corner. There were 2 benches stacked like bleachers. Each fit 5 people pressed tightly against one another. Those on the lower bench sat between the spread knees of people on the upper bench, and 2 more stood in front of everyone, their crotches at eye level for all who were seated. Not one more person could have fit. The atmosphere inside was jovial. 2 women were in the corner, and the rest were men making each other laugh. I took a seat on the lower bench, and watched as the 2 men in front of me whipped each other with a fresh-cut tree branch, slapping the green leaves against their back, chest, and legs. A traditional practice, though I don't know why. The temperature hovered at 195 degrees Fahrenheit. Each searing breath cooked me a little more, and I was struggling just to be in there. The kayakers had been in cold water all day, while I bicycled 7.5 hours under a hot sun. I needed to hydrate and cool off, not sit in an oven. A little water was splashed on the stones, filling the air with hot steam. I inhaled 1 breath of the humidified air, and that was all I could take. I lasted only 8 minutes. Stepping into the outer room, I went to the bucket to dump cold water on my head, then moved to the porch to sit naked under the stars in the warm evening air. Occasionally, one of the men would burst out of the door, streaking into the darkness. I would hear a splash and a yelp from the nearby river. Then they would come running back past me and into the banya again. At the end of the night, a guy offered me marijuana grown in the local Altai mountains. In my life, I've rarely smoked cannabis, but I accept it. On this journey, I've learned to accept the gift. He and a few others were smoking out of what he called a gravity bong, a contraption I've never seen before. In practice, the rig utilized a bucket of water and a plastic soda bottle to ram 2 liters of smoke into my lungs. I lifted my head and blew a cloud into the air above me. Immediately, my vision became pale and my balance began to falter. I lunged for a chair, only 3 steps away, and managed to sit before I fell. I put my elbows on my knees, rested my head in my hands, then stayed like that. I was very high, a little drunk, dehydrated, and after pedaling 6 to 8 miles uphill, my thighs were twitching from exhaustion. I needed a moment. By the time I collected myself, everyone had retreated to their tents. I'm now lying on the ground next to my bike, looking up at the starry sky, gripping the earth as I race through the cosmos. July 22nd, 2013. Resting today. I didn't bicycle anywhere today. I was appreciating having company, and this place is stunningly beautiful. Green valleys meander away in many directions, with grasses and forests covering the slopes of the angular mountains. Light and shadows played across the scene, and throughout the day, I was continuously struck by the magnificence. I spent time with the two women from Moscow on summer break from university. They were in the Banya with me last night. I commented on the intense heat, and they said everyone could tell I wasn't Russian when I left so quickly. They were both artists, and we shared sketches from our journals. One of the women had a wonderful pencil drawing of smooth rocks on a stream bed. I showed them my ink landscapes from across Russia. The pages were filled with clouds and sky, but in this mountainous terrain, my eyes once again drawn to the land. Tonight was not as raucous as yesterday. People were tired and went to bed early. I've got my hammock hanging by the river. The sky is now dark, and the flowing water is all I hear. July 23rd, 2013. A friend to bike with. I left early this morning, before most people were out of their tents. This way, I could skip an extended goodbye. I wanted to get back to my solitude and the beautiful scenery. Through the morning and into the afternoon, I climbed my way out of the valley. The ridges that have run high above me for 5 days slowly shrank into low hills, and then they were gone. In front of me it was a wide flat expanse, rimmed by a distant mountain range of glacier-crusted peaks. The scene was magnificent. Toward the end of the day, I caught up with an American named Mark, riding a loaded bicycle. Mark was in his early 40s and worked as a teacher in New York City. His trip started in eastern Russia in early May, about the same time I started in western Russia, and we finally just met in the middle. Mark has gone even farther than me, saying that he averages 90 miles per day. Apparently, the forest had so many ticks that he couldn't set up his tent without becoming covered in them. He's been riding his bike all day and sleeping in the bus shelters along the highway. His story described the tenacity I could appreciate. Mark is also going to Mongolia, but where I will turn east, he's heading south into Tibet, then on to Burma. For now, though, we are on the same road, and so we biked into the evening together. Mark and I set up camp on a wide, treeless flat. There was only thin grass growing, and no place to hide, so we simply picked a spot to lay on the ground. A local man noticed us and rode his motorcycle over as we cooked dinner. He invited us to sleep in his yurt this evening, pointing to a white dome a couple miles away. Mark and I looked at each other and told the man we would stay here. We had gone far enough for the day. Through the evening, I watched a sheet of rain drift across the land carrying a magnificent bright rainbow. The sun dropped over the far-off peaks, and I zipped my sleeping bag against a rush of cool air. I feel delighted to be in such a remarkable place.